In an age before the great rains, when the memory of the world was still young, humanity did not live in scattered tribes but in burgeoning city-states carved from the heart of the earth itself. The grandest of these was Ethelberg, a city of white stone and towering ziggurats, nestled in the shadow of the formidable Whispering Peaks. For generations, the people of Ethelberg had lived in accordance with the rhythm of the seasons, their lives governed by the sun's rise and the moon's gentle command. They were a people of stone, wood and faith, honoring the silent, unseen creator who had breathed life into the first man, Adam. But a sickness had befallen Ethelberg. It was a subtle poison that began not in the body, but in the soul. It had started a lifetime ago, with the arrival of the visitors. They came not in ships across the sea, but as falling stars that did not burn out, landing softly upon the highest crags of the Whispering Peaks. They were beings of breathtaking beauty and impossible stature, cloaked in light and possessing knowledge that shattered the simple understanding of mankind. They called themselves the Watchers, sent from the heavens to be guides and guardians. At first, their gifts seemed like miracles. They taught men the secrets of the earth, how to draw metal from rock, not the soft copper and tin of their ancestors, but a hard grey metal that could hold an edge sharper than obsidian. Iron. They showed women how to grind colored minerals and shimmering dust to paint their faces, creating masks of alluring beauty that hid their true spirit. They revealed the patterns of the stars, not as celestial guides for planting and harvest, but as a means to divine fates, to pry into the tapestry of what was to come, a knowledge forbidden to mortals. Among the people of Ethelberg lived a man named Enoch. He was not a king or a high priest, but a stonemason and a chronicler. His hands, calloused and strong, were skilled in carving the history of his people onto tablets of clay and pillars of granite. While others were mesmerized by the new crafts, Enoch felt a deep disquiet. He saw the shimmering metals being forged not into plows but into swords and spearheads. He saw the beautiful face paints, sowing seeds of jealousy and vanity among the women, turning sisters against one another. He heard the whispers of divination turning into shouts of ambition, as men sought power foretold by the stars rather than earning it through righteous deeds. The Watchers, with their leader Semjaza's charismatic grace and the brooding genius of the artisan Azazel, had become idols. They walked among men, their divine forms a constant reminder of the power humanity now craved. They took the daughters of men as their wives, a union that terrified Enoch, for he knew in his heart that the sacred and the profane were never meant to mingle so intimately. It was a violation of a divine law that was older than the mountains themselves. One evening, as twilight bled purple and orange across the sky, Enoch retreated to his workshop on the outskirts of the city. The air was thick with the metallic tang from the new forges and the cloying scent of exotic perfumes. The sounds of raucous laughter and sharp, angry disputes echoed from the city center. It was a symphony of chaos, and it grieved him. He was carving a new tablet, not of a king's decree or a merchant's ledger, but of the sun's journey through the sky, a perfect, unchanging cycle. It was his quiet act of rebellion and attempt to preserve the memory of divine order in a world embracing chaos. His wife, Elara, brought him a simple meal of bread and dates. Her eyes, once clear and bright, were now perpetually clouded with worry. "They are building a new forge in the main square," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Azazel himself is overseeing it. They say he will craft weapons that can shatter stone." Enoch placed his chisel down, his knuckles white. "They are not crafting weapons, Elara. They are forging our demise. They teach us to master the earth, but in doing so, they teach us to forget the heavens." He looked at his young son, Methuselah, sleeping soundly on a cot in the corner, blissfully unaware of the shadow stretching over their world. A fierce, protective love burned in Enoch's chest. For his son's sake, and for the sake of the Creator whose name was now seldom spoken, he had to hold fast to the old ways. As night deepened, and the city's cacophony faded into a drunken slumber, Enoch remained awake, praying. He did not pray for riches or for power, but for understanding. "O great architect of all," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the distant stars, "why has this plague been allowed to fester? Have you forsaken your creation?" His prayer was met not with silence, but with an answer so profound it shook the very foundations of his being. It began as a tremor, not in the earth, but in the air. The small oil lamp in his workshop flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. But the darkness lasted only a moment. A light began to bloom in the center of the room, a light not of fire but of pure white essence, so brilliant it was painful to behold, yet it cast no heat. Within the light, two forms began to coalesce. They were taller than any man, taller even than the watchers. They were not made of flesh and blood, but of living fire and crystallized sound. One radiated a light as warm and golden as the dawn, the other a light as serene and silver as the full moon. Enoch fell to his knees, shielding his face, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was not the arrogant grandeur of the watchers. This was true, terrifying, divine power. A voice entered his mind, not through his ears, but as a thought that was not his own. It was a voice that was both a thunderous choir and a gentle whisper. Enoch, son of Jared, your righteousness has ascended before the Lord of spirits. Your grief has been heard in the highest heavens. The second being's voice joined the first, a harmony of cosmic perfection. Do not be afraid. We are not sent to harm you. We are sent to deliver you. You will not taste death as your brethren will. Your purpose is greater. You will be the scribe for all that is, all that was, and all that will be judged. Enoch, trembling, dared to look up. He could not see faces, only shifting constellations of light that hinted at eyes filled with the wisdom of eons. Who are you? He stammered, his voice a dry crackle. The golden being replied, its presence filling the small workshop with an overwhelming sense of peace. I am Uriel, the light of God, and this is Raphael, the healer of God. The Creator has chosen you, Enoch. Your journey begins now. You will walk through the heavens and witness the foundations of creation and the architecture of justice. You will record the sins of the fallen and the fate that awaits them. Your words will be a testament, a warning, and a promise for a new world that will be washed clean. The light intensified, lifting Enoch from the floor. He felt a weightlessness, a sense of his physical form dissolving. He caught one last glimpse of his workshop, the tablet of the sun's path lying on his bench, a final relic of a world he was about to leave behind. He was no longer just Enoch, the carver of stone. He was Enoch, the witness, and his ascension had begun. The world Enoch knew did not simply shrink, it dissolved. The solid earth beneath his feet, the stone walls of his workshop, the familiar scent of clay and olive oil all became a memory in an instant. He was untethered, a disembodied consciousness adrift in a river of pure light. The voices of Uriel and Raphael were no longer external sounds, but were woven into the fabric of his awareness, guiding him, reassuring him as his mortal senses gave way to something new, something impossibly vast. He felt himself surge upwards, passing through the roof of his home as if it were mist. Below, the city of Aethelberg became a tapestry of flickering torchlight, a fragile island of life in a sea of darkness. He saw the great ziggurat, where the watchers held court, glowing with a cold, artificial brilliance. He saw the winding streets, the humble homes, and for a fleeting, heart-wrenching moment, he saw the small, warm light of his own dwelling, where Alara and Methuselah slept, unaware that their husband and father was being torn from their world. A pang of loss, sharp and profound, pierced through his awe. Do not despair, Enoch. Raphael's thought resonated within him, a balm of gentle understanding. Those you love are under the Creator's gaze. Your love for them is the very reason you were chosen. It is the anchor of your humanity, which you must never lose. They ascended higher, the air thinning until it was no more. The blackness of the void was absolute, dotted with the sharp, diamond-like points of distant stars. He saw the world as only the Creator had seen it before. A perfect sphere of swirling blue, white and brown, hanging suspended in an infinite ocean of night. It was a sight of such majestic beauty and profound loneliness that tears he could no longer physically shed formed in his soul. Then they approached the first barrier. It appeared as a shimmering curtain of light, 1,000 rainbows woven together into a gate that pulsed with the rhythm of a silent cosmic heartbeat. As they passed through it, the cold of the void was replaced by a soft, ambient warmth. They had arrived in the first heaven. Enoch gasped, his newly formed spiritual senses overwhelmed. This was the source of all the waters of the earth. He stood upon a floor of translucent crystal, and below him he could see vast celestial oceans of vapor. These were the storehouses of the clouds, swirling in slow, graceful currents, Angelic beings, beings of pure form and purpose, moved through these mists, their passage like the sweep of a gentle wind, guiding the currents that would become the rain and storms of the world below. In another quadrant of this immense space, he saw rivers of shimmering dew flowing from celestial springs to be gathered and scattered over the earth each morning. Further still were colossal mountains of crystalline frost and perfectly formed glaciers of snow, each snowflake an intricate masterpiece of divine geometry waiting for its appointed season. "This is the first domain," Uriel's voice echoed, filled with a sense of immaculate order. "The great treasury of the firmament. Everything here moves according to the law. Every drop of rain, every flake of snow has its purpose and its time, decreed from the beginning. This is the order that the fallen ones on earth seek to disrupt with their chaotic sorcery." Enoch watched, mesmerized. It was a place of perfect function, a beautiful, intricate machine designed to sustain life. There was no ambition here, no jealousy, only the serene joy of purpose fulfilled. This, he realized, was the harmony he had been trying to capture on his stone tablets. But their journey was not to linger. Raphael gently guided his consciousness forward, towards another, higher gate. As they approached, the gentle warmth of the first heaven began to recede, replaced by a palpable sense of sorrow and a chilling silence. The gate to the second heaven was not made of light. It was a vast, arching portal of what looked like polished obsidian, absorbing all light, reflecting nothing. Passing through it was like plunging into a cold, starless twilight. The second heaven was a place of immense, empty space, a vast, shadowy expanse filled with a profound sense of loss. And in this desolate realm, Enoch saw them. They were chained, hundreds of them. Their forms were like those of the watchers on earth, luminous, beautiful and powerful, but their light was dimmed, flickering like dying embers. Their magnificent wings, once capable of soaring through the cosmos, were bound by chains not of iron, but of solidified grief and shadow. They were not raging or screaming, they were weeping. The air was thick with the sound of their silent, eternal tears, a chorus of despair that tore at Enoch's soul. They wept for the light they had lost, for the heavens they could no longer enter, and for the presence of the Creator they had willingly abandoned. Enoch recoiled in horror and pity. He had expected monsters, grotesque demons. But these were beings of fallen beauty, their torment made all the more terrible by the memory of the glory they once possessed. "What is this place?" Enoch projected his thought, his voice trembling. "Who are they? They look like the ones who walk among us on earth." "They are their brethren," Raphael answered, his own essence tinged with a deep sadness. "These are the angels who first transgressed the commandment. Long before the group led by Semjaza lusted after your women, this legion, led by a star of the morning, thought to place their own throne above the stars of God. They sought not to guide creation but to rule it. For their pride, they were cast down from the highest heavens." Uriel's voice was stern, a counterpoint to Raphael's sorrow. "This is their prison, a place of waiting. Here they remain until the great day of judgment, when their crimes will be accounted for in full. They are a warning, Enoch. This is the price of rebellion. This is the fate that awaits Azazel and his followers. They chose a moment of fleeting power over an eternity of light." Enoch stared at the weeping figures, their divine forms shrouded in darkness. He saw one of them look up, and in its dimmed, sorrowful eyes he saw a reflection of the same arrogant pride that he now saw in the eyes of Semjaza. The watchers on earth were not making a new mistake. They were repeating an ancient celestial tragedy. The corruption of his world was not a simple earthly matter. It was a battle in a war that had begun in the heart of heaven itself. The weight of his purpose settled upon him then, no longer just a command, but a terrible, necessary burden. He was not just a witness to the fall of man, he was a witness to the fall of angels, and he understood that the story he was meant to write would bind the fates of both heaven and earth together forever. Leaving the desolate sorrow of the second heaven was a relief. Yet the image of the chained and weeping angels was seared into Enoch's consciousness. It was a somber prelude to the revelations that awaited him, a stark reminder of the stakes in this cosmic drama. Uriel and Raphael guided him onward and upward, through a third gate that shimmered with an emerald and gold light. As they passed through, a symphony of scent and sound washed over him, cleansing the lingering chill of the prison heaven. They had arrived in the third heaven, and it was a paradise beyond mortal imagination. This was the celestial Eden, the archetypal garden from which the terrestrial Eden had been but a shadow. Enoch stood in a landscape of impossible beauty. The grass beneath his spiritual feet was not green but glowed with a soft, internal luminescence. The trees were not of wood, but of living crystal and precious metals, their leaves shimmering with the colors of dawn. Some trees bore fruit that pulsed with light, while others bore flowers that released melodies instead of fragrances. A river flowed through the center of the garden, its waters not of liquid, but of pure flowing life force, and its banks were lined with fragrant spices, cinnamon, balsam, and myrrh that filled the air with a sacred aroma. This is the place prepared for the righteous. Uriel's voice was softer here, tinged with a reverence that Enoch had not heard before. It is the eternal home for those who live their lives in accordance with the law, who walk in humility and love before the Creator. Their spirits, after their earthly journey is complete, will rest here until the day of resurrection. Angelic beings, different from those in the first heaven, tended the garden. They moved with a graceful serenity, pruning the melodic flowers and guiding the currents of the river of life. There was no labor here, only joyful service. As Enoch watched, he felt a profound sense of peace, a rightness that resonated with the deepest part of his soul. This was the world as it was meant to be. This was the reward. In the center of this paradise stood two trees that dwarfed all others. One was magnificent, its branches laden with fruit that glowed with the warm, gentle light of 1,000 candles. Its presence radiated a sense of endless peace and vitality. That, said Raphael, is the tree of life. He who eats of its fruit shall know no sickness, no sorrow, and no decay. But it was the other tree that drew Enoch's gaze. It stood a short distance away, beautiful in its own right, with leaves like polished silver and fruit that swirled with deep, captivating colors of indigo and violet. Yet, an aura of profound, ancient knowledge and a subtle, disquieting power emanated from it. It was alluring and dangerous in equal measure. And that, Uriel's voice was low and solemn, is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Its fruit grants wisdom, but a wisdom that the mortal soul was not designed to bear. It reveals the duality of all things, light and shadow, joy and pain, creation and destruction. To know one is to be condemned to experience the other. Enoch understood instantly. This was the heart of the original sin, the celestial root of the tragedy that had unfolded on earth. The Watchers, in their arrogance, had plucked fruit from this very archetype of a tree. They had taken the forbidden knowledge, and like careless children with a blazing torch, had brought its dangerous fire down to the world of men. They gave humanity the knowledge of metalworking, but with it came the evil of swords. They gave the knowledge of adornment, but with it came the evil of vanity. They gave the knowledge of the stars, but with it came the evil of hubris, of seeking to control one's own destiny. His gaze was then drawn to a place at the edge of the celestial garden. The vibrant light of paradise dimmed, and the landscape became twisted and dark. The melodic flowers were replaced by sharp, wailing thorns, and the glowing grass became a blackened, scorched earth. It was a place of torment, a northern quadrant of this same heaven, separated by a chasm of terrifying depth. The air here was filled with a palpable darkness, punctuated by flames that gave off no light, only a searing spiritual heat. Moans of agony and cries of despair echoed from the abyss. Enoch shrank back, horrified. What is this place of dread, set so close to paradise? This is the place of punishment for the wicked, Uriel explained, his voice devoid of pity. A place prepared for those who on earth deny the Creator, who oppress the righteous, and who live lives of sin and blasphemy. Here their souls are tormented in darkness, fire and frost, awaiting the final judgment. The stark contrast was staggering, the ultimate reward and the ultimate punishment, existing side by side, a perfect and terrible symmetry. He saw souls shrouded in shadow, their forms twisted by the sins they had committed in life. He saw kings who had been tyrants, now stripped of their crowns and power, weeping in impotent rage. He saw merchants who had cheated the poor, now eternally hungry and thirsty. He saw those who had lived for nothing but their own pleasure, now experiencing nothing but unending pain. But one group drew his attention. They were separate from the others, trapped in a peculiar kind of torment. They did not scream or weep, but wandered in a state of perpetual confusion and longing, forever gazing across the chasm towards the garden of light. a paradise they could see but never, ever reach. "And who are they?" Enoch asked, a sense of tragic irony filling him. Raphael's voice was heavy with sorrow. "These are the souls of those who were not wholly evil but who lived their lives in indifference. They did not oppress the righteous, but neither did they aid them. They did not blaspheme the Creator, but neither did they honor him. Theirs was the sin of apathy. Because they chose no side in life, they are given no place in death. Their punishment is to witness the joy they rejected for eternity, forever suspended between salvation and damnation." The lesson was brutal and clear. The universe did not tolerate neutrality. Apathy was a choice, and it had its own terrible consequence. The weight of it all pressed down on Enoch. The order of the cosmos was not gentle, it was absolute. Justice and mercy, reward and punishment were woven into the very fabric of existence. The chaos on earth was a violent affront to this perfect, terrifying order. He now understood that the mission given to him was not just to record events, it was to reveal this divine architecture, to show humanity the two paths that lay before them and the unchangeable destinations to which they led. He had to make them see that their every choice, every action, and every moment of indifference echoed in these celestial realms. The choice was theirs, but the consequences were eternal. The journey through the third heaven had left Enoch in a state of profound contemplation. The stark duality of reward and punishment, of paradise and torment, had stripped away any remaining naivety about the nature of the cosmos. Justice was not an abstract concept. It was a physical, spiritual place. As they ascended once more, leaving the Garden of Light and the abyss of despair behind, he felt a change in the very essence of their travel. The ascent was becoming steeper, the spiritual pressure immense. They were approaching the center, the nexus of all creation. They passed through a fourth heaven of celestial luminaries, a vast cosmic clockwork where Uriel showed him the intricate pathways of the sun and moon. He saw how they traveled through immense gates in the east and west, their movements precise to the fraction of a moment, governing the days, months, and seasons on earth below. It was a place of pure mathematical beauty, a silent testament to the Creator's intellect. The fifth heaven was a realm of silent vigilance. Here, legions of warrior angels, unlike any he had seen before, stood at attention. Their forms were more martial, their light more focused and intense. They were the soldiers of the divine host. Their purpose, not creation or tending, but the defense of the higher heavens. Among them, however, Enoch saw a faction whose light was muted, their faces etched with a defiant sorrow. These were the Grigori, the very rank of watchers from which Semjaza and his followers had descended. They were the ones who had remained loyal, but they mourned for their fallen brethren, their silent grief, a constant presence in this otherwise stoic realm. The sixth heaven was a symphony of praise. It was a realm of pure sound and light, inhabited by the archangels and the most powerful celestial beings. Enoch witnessed the cherubim, beings of 4 faces and myriad wings, their eyes filled with an all-seeing wisdom. He saw the seraphim, fiery 6-winged serpents of pure light, whose voices led the unending chorus of Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The music was so powerful, so sacred, that Enoch felt his spiritual form would dissolve just from hearing it. Raphael and Uriel shielded him, their light enveloping him like a protective cloak. This is the threshold, Enoch. Uriel's thought was a thunderclap of reverence. Beyond lies the seventh heaven. Beyond lies the source of all things. Prepare your soul. What you are about to witness is what no mortal has ever seen and lived. They passed through the final gate, and all sensation ceased. There was no light, no dark, no sound, no silence. There was only being. Enoch felt he had passed into the mind of God itself, and then he saw it. It was a house, but a house built of impossible things. Its walls were not of stone, but of crystallized light, like a palace carved from a single, flawless diamond. Its roof was a tapestry of comets in motion, their fiery tails sweeping across the expanse in a silent, majestic dance. The floor beneath him was a pavement of solid ice, yet it radiated an intense, holy fire. This fire did not burn, it purified. It flowed in rivers around the structure, creating a boundary that no impurity could ever cross. He was standing in the antechamber of the throne of God. Even Uriel and Raphael, beings of immense power, did not proceed further. They bowed their heads, their own brilliant light seeming humble in the face of this overwhelming presence. "We can go no further," Raphael's voice was a whisper in Enoch's soul. "From here you must be guided by one who serves in the presence itself. Do not be afraid. Remember your purpose." As they receded, another being approached Enoch. It was a seraph, one of the fiery attendants, its form so brilliant that Enoch could perceive nothing but a column of living, intelligent flame. Its voice was like the sound of roaring waters and shattering glass, yet it brought peace to Enoch's terrified heart. "Come, Son of Man," the seraph commanded. "The Lord of Spirits has called you. The Ancient of Days awaits." The seraph led him through the crystal walls, which parted before them like curtains. They entered the throne room itself. The sheer scale of it was beyond comprehension. The ceiling was the living firmament, filled with stars and galaxies. And in the center of it all was the throne. It was a chariot of fire, its wheels like burning rings, each one covered in 1,000 eyes that saw all of time and space simultaneously. The throne itself was elevated, carved from a single block of sapphire that shone with the light of a blue sun. And upon the throne sat a figure. Enoch could not see a face. To look upon the face of the Creator was to be annihilated. What he saw was a form cloaked in a robe of purest white light, whiter than any snow, more brilliant than any star. The being's hair was like white wool, signifying an age that predated time itself. This was the Ancient of Days, the Lord of Spirits, the wellspring from which all reality flowed. A power emanated from the throne that was both the source of all life and the absolute finality of all judgment. It was the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, made manifest. Enoch fell prostrate, his entire being trembling violently, his spirit overwhelmed. He felt the full weight of his own mortality, his insignificance, his impurity. He was a speck of dust in the presence of the infinite. He felt his consciousness begin to unravel, the sheer holiness of the place too much for his soul to bear. He was about to be undone, but then a hand touched him. It was not the hand of the seraph. He looked up, his vision blurred by the overwhelming light. Standing beside the great throne was another figure. This one was different. While radiating a divine light, the form was recognizable. It was the form of a man, yet perfected, glorified, and eternal. His face was like lightning, his eyes like lamps of fire, and his voice like the sound of many waters. He was ancient, yet young, powerful, yet gentle. This was the one Enoch had glimpsed in his visions of the final judgment, the elect one, the Son of Man. "Stand up, Enoch," the figure said, his voice carrying both supreme authority and profound compassion. He helped Enoch to his feet. "You are brought here not to be judged, but to be a judge. You are here to receive the verdict that you will carry back to the fallen." Enoch stared, speechless, into the face of the Son of Man. He saw in those fiery eyes not just power, but empathy. He saw a wisdom that understood the frailty of mortals and the arrogance of angels. The Ancient of Days on the throne did not speak with a voice, but with a wave of pure thought that filled the entire chamber, the entire universe. "I have seen the violence and the corruption. I have heard the cries of the earth stained with the blood of the innocent. The guardians I sent to watch have become predators. They have forsaken their sacred duty for fleeting lust and have taught men the arts of their own destruction. The balance is broken, the law has been defiled." The voice of the Son of Man then spoke, acting as the intermediary, the Word. "The sentence has been passed, Enoch. The judgment is set. You will be my herald. You will return from this place and speak my words to the fallen. You will be their prophet of doom and the bearer of the covenant for the few who will be saved." Enoch, standing between the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man, finally understood his true place. He was not just a scribe. He was a messenger, a living bridge between the highest heaven and the corrupted earth, tasked with delivering the final, irrevocable judgment of God. In the overwhelming presence of the throne, time itself seemed to have ceased. Enoch stood, a mortal soul caught in the nexus of eternal power, held steady only by the reassuring presence of the Son of Man. The awesome thought of the Ancient of Days still echoed in his spirit, a verdict that was both absolute and terrifyingly just. The Son of Man turned to Enoch, his eyes like burning lamps holding a universe of sorrow and resolve. "Before you deliver the sentence, you must first understand the depth of their transgression. You have seen their future punishment in the second heaven, but you must now witness the origin of their authority, the sacred trust they shattered." With a gesture, the Son of Man revealed a space beside the throne. There, suspended in the luminous air, were countless scrolls, each one radiating a soft internal light. These were not scrolls of parchment, but of woven starlight, containing the fundamental laws and destinies of all creation. Each of these, the Son of Man explained, contains the divine commission for a legion of angels, their duties, their boundaries, their sacred oaths. This, he said, indicating a scroll that glowed with a particularly brilliant silvery light, was theirs. He beckoned Enoch closer. As Enoch drew near, the scroll unfurled itself before him. The writing on it was not in any human script. It was a language of pure meaning, composed of living symbols of light and geometry that flowed directly into his understanding. He read of the Watcher's original purpose, their exalted station. They were chosen to be the guardians of humanity's infancy, to watch over them from a distance, to offer subtle guidance without direct interference, and to ensure that the delicate balance between the mortal and celestial realms was maintained. They were to be silent shepherds, protecting the flock from spiritual dangers they could not yet comprehend. The scrolls spoke of their primary oath, to cherish and protect humanity's free will above all else. They were forbidden from imposing their knowledge, from accelerating mankind's development, from revealing the secrets of heaven or the arts of war. Their role was to be one of loving, patient observation. As Enoch read the sacred words, a profound sadness welled within him. He saw the beautiful, noble purpose that had been entrusted to them, and then he saw how every single clause of their commission had been violated. "You shall not covet the forms of mortals," the scroll declared. They had not only coveted, but had taken wives, defiling both their celestial nature and human sanctity. "You shall not bestow the knowledge of the heavens unbidden," it commanded. They had vomited forth forbidden secrets of metallurgy, sorcery, cosmetics, and divination, poisoning humanity with wisdom it could not handle. "You shall guard them from the creatures of violence." They had instead birthed a generation of violent creatures, the Nephilim, who devoured the earth and its inhabitants. The scroll was a testament to their spectacular failure, a portrait of their cosmic treason. They knew the law, the Son of Man said, his voice resonating with a righteous anger. They knew the consequences. Their leader, Semjaza, feared the outcome and bound his followers by a terrible oath on the peaks of Mount Hermon, so that they would all share in the guilt. They did not fall out of ignorance. They plunged into sin with open eyes. Then the Son of Man raised his hand. Another scroll appeared, this one dark, its characters seemingly written in shadow and fire. "And this, Enoch, is the judgment you will carry. Read it and commit it to your soul, for these will be your words." Enoch's gaze fell upon the new scroll. As he read, a chill passed through him, a cold that not even the fires of the throne room could warm. It was a legal pronouncement, a divine sentence, as precise and unyielding as the laws that governed the stars. It began by naming the 20 leaders of the 200 fallen angels, with Semjaza and Azazel listed first. It recounted their crimes in meticulous detail, the forsaking of their heavenly station, the defilement of human women, the teaching of forbidden arts, the unleashing of giants, and the filling of the earth with blood and injustice. Then came the sentence. It was a twofold judgment. For Azazel, whose sins were deemed the greatest for teaching the art of war and deception, the punishment was swift and terrible. He was to be bound hand and foot by the archangel Raphael, cast into the complete darkness of the desert of Dudael, and buried beneath a pile of sharp and rugged rocks. There he would remain, his face covered by a veil, so that he could no longer see the light until the great day of judgment, when he would be cast into the lake of fire. For Semjaza and the others who followed him, their punishment was to be one of prolonged agony. They would first be forced to watch the slaughter of their own beloved children, the Nephilim. They would see their monstrous offspring turn on each other in a frenzy of cannibalistic violence, until none remained. Only after witnessing this horror would their own sentence begin. They would be bound by the archangel Michael and imprisoned in the valleys of the earth for 70 generations. They would be trapped, hidden from sight, until the judgment of the consummation of all ages, at which point they too would be led away to the abyss of fire, to be tormented forever. And for the world they had corrupted, a great cleansing, a deluge of water that would wipe the slate clean, washing away the giants, the tainted bloodlines, and the wicked civilizations they had inspired. Only a single righteous seed, the line of Enoch's own great-grandson Noah, would be preserved. When Enoch had finished reading, the scroll of judgment rolled itself up and dissolved into his being. The words were now part of him, a heavy, burning weight in his soul. "Now you know," the Son of Man said, his expression somber. "The time has come for you to descend, not back to your home, not yet. You will go to the place where the fallen now dwell. You will stand before them, a single mortal man, and you will be the voice of the divine throne. You will look into the eyes of their pride, and you will pronounce their doom." Enoch felt a tremor of fear. To face those beings, the powerful, arrogant watchers who had become gods in the eyes of men. He was just a stonemason. How could he stand before them? As if hearing his thoughts, the Son of Man placed a hand on his shoulder. A current of pure power flowed into Enoch, not the terrifying power of the Ancient of Days, but a strengthening, steadying force. "Fear not," he said, "for my authority goes with you. My words will be in your mouth. They will see in your eyes the fire of this place, and they will know that their time is at an end. Go, Enoch, be my witness." The world of the seventh heaven began to fade. The throne of fire, the glorious Son of Man, the rivers of light all dissolved as Enoch began his descent. A journey back through the celestial spheres, no longer as a curious observer, but as a herald of divine judgment, carrying the terrible and righteous sentence in the core of his soul. The descent was nothing like the ascent. The journey upward had been one of wonder and revelation, a peeling back of cosmic layers. The journey downward was a purposeful plummet, a focused fall through the celestial realms. Enoch passed through the sixth heaven's chorus of praise, the fifth's legions of silent watchers, and the fourth's cosmic clockwork. But he no longer saw them as a curious traveler. He saw them now through the lens of judgment, as the perfect ordered systems that the fallen had betrayed. The words of the fiery scroll burned within him, a righteous anger that was not his own, but a reflection of the divine justice he now served. He did not return to the bustling, corrupted streets of Aethelberg. Uriel and Raphael, who rejoined him as he passed the lower heavens, did not guide him to his home. Instead, his spiritual form solidified not on the plains of his city, but high in the treacherous, windswept crags of the whispering peaks. He stood on the very mountain where the Watchers had first descended, the place where they had sworn their unholy oath, Mount Hermon. The air here was thin and bitingly cold. Jagged peaks of black rock clawed at a bruised twilight sky. This was the Watchers' earthly court, a place between heaven and earth, a symbol of their own liminal, corrupted state. They had chosen this desolate height as their meeting place, far from the mortal throngs they toyed with, a place where they could look down upon the world as its self-proclaimed masters. And they were there, all 200 of them. They were gathered in a vast, natural amphitheater of rock. They were not carousing or celebrating as they did in the city below. A somber, anxious mood hung over them like a shroud. Some stood in silent, brooding groups, their luminous forms casting long, flickering shadows. Others paced restlessly, their beautiful faces marred by a disquiet they could not name. They had felt a shift in the cosmic balance, a subtle tremor in the foundations of their power. Their illicit divinations had grown murky, the future they sought to control now veiled from their sight. At the center of the gathering were their leaders. Semjaza, his form radiating a proud, defiant light, stood upon a high ledge, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the horizon as if expecting a challenge. Beside him, Azazel was meticulously examining a newly forged sword, its dark, polished metal reflecting his own hard, unyielding features. He was the artisan of ruin, the genius behind their technological gifts to mankind, and his arrogance was a palpable force. Into this tense assembly, Enoch walked. He was a single mortal man clad in simple stonemason's robes. He was not armed. He was not flanked by angels. He was utterly, terrifyingly alone. As he stepped into the amphitheater, a hush fell over the 200 fallen angels. At first there was confusion, then contemptuous amusement. What was this fragile human doing here, in their sacred place of power? "Look," one of them sneered, his voice like grinding stones. "One of the little claymen has lost his way. Perhaps he has come to worship us." Another laughed, a sound like cracking ice. "Let him kneel and we might teach him a secret or two." Semjaza turned his imperious gaze upon Enoch. His eyes, which could charm kings and enchant women, narrowed. "You have courage, mortal. I will grant you that. But it is the courage of a fool. This place is not for your kind. Speak your purpose before we tire of you and cast you from this peak." Enoch did not flinch. He did not bow. He met Semjaza's gaze, and for the first time, the leader of the fallen felt a flicker of uncertainty. The eyes of this mortal were not filled with the fear or adoration he was accustomed to seeing. They were filled with an ancient burning light. They held the reflection of a fire that could consume stars. They held the authority of the throne room. When Enoch spoke, his voice was his own. Yet it was amplified by a celestial resonance. It was not loud, but it cut through the biting wind and the arrogant murmurs, carrying to every corner of the amphitheater with absolute clarity. "I have not come to worship," Enoch declared, his voice steady and strong. "I have not come to ask for secrets. I have come from a place you can no longer enter. I have stood before the Lord of Spirits and the Ancient of Days. I have been sent to you as a herald. I bring you not a petition but a verdict." A wave of shock rippled through the assembled watchers. Some laughed nervously, but the laughter died in their throats. The name Lord of Spirits had not been spoken here for an age. The authority in Enoch's voice was undeniable. Azazel looked up from his sword, his brow furrowed in a dark scowl. "You lie. No mortal can pass the gates. You are a trickster sent by our enemies in the lower city." "Do I seem like a trickster?" Enoch replied, taking another step forward. The ground around his feet began to glow with a faint, silvery light, the residual energy of his journey. "Look into my eyes, Azazel, you who taught men to fashion masks of deception. Can you not recognize the truth when it stands before you? I have seen the treasury of the snow. I have seen the prison of your rebellious brethren, and I have seen the garden of the righteous, a place your feet will never touch." He spoke of the celestial realms with the casual familiarity of a native. The details he described, the gates, the angelic orders, the specific torments, were things no mortal could possibly know. The watchers stared, their arrogance beginning to crumble, replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. They were not facing a man, they were facing a messenger. Semjaza's composure finally broke. His charismatic facade melted away, revealing the raw fear beneath. "If you have truly come from the highest, then what is the message? What judgment does he pass on his wayward sons?" The word sons was spoken with a mix of old pride and new terror. Enoch's gaze swept over them all, from the powerful leaders to the lowest of their followers. He saw their fallen glory, their squandered potential. But the pity he had felt in the second heaven was now burned away by the righteous fire of the scroll within him. "You are to receive no peace," Enoch began, his voice ringing with the finality of the throne. "You petitioned for forgiveness for yourselves and for the monstrous brood you have sired. Your petition is denied. You will never again ascend to heaven. For all of eternity, you are barred from the light." A collective gasp, a sound of pure spiritual agony, rose from the 200. "You will be bound upon the earth, not as kings but as prisoners." Enoch continued, his voice relentless. "But first, you will have the desire of your hearts. You will see your beloved children. You will watch as the giants you created, the Nephilim, are driven by a spirit of madness. They will turn upon each other, and you will witness them slaughter one another until not a single one remains. You will watch them die in a torrent of blood and violence, and you will be powerless to intervene." The faces of the watchers contorted in horror. The love for their monstrous offspring was the last twisted shred of pure emotion they had left. The thought of watching them be destroyed was a torment beyond imagining. "And when your children are gone," Enoch's voice dropped to a cold, hard whisper, "your own sentence will begin. You will be bound in the dark places of the earth for 70 generations, a number to mock the perfection of the heavens you forsook. And after that long age of darkness, you will be brought forth for the final judgment, and you will be cast into the abyss of fire to be tormented forever." He had delivered the message. The words of the scroll had been spoken into the world. He stood in the silence that followed, the weight of the prophecy hanging in the air like a guillotine. The prideful, beautiful gods of Mount Hermon were broken. They stood motionless, their light flickering, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated despair. They had gambled against the Creator, and they had lost everything. The silence on Mount Hermon was a living thing, a heavy, crushing void, where moments before there had been divine arrogance. Enoch's words, the final, irrevocable sentence from the throne, had shattered their reality. The 200 fallen angels stood like statues carved from despair, their immortal spirits reeling from a blow more devastating than any physical weapon. The future they had imagined, an eternal reign over a world remade in their image, had been replaced by an eternity of darkness, torment, and loss. It was not anger that first broke the silence. It was grief. A low, guttural moan began with one of the lesser watchers, a sound of such profound agony that it seemed to make the very rocks weep. The sound was taken up by another, and then another, until the entire amphitheater was filled with a chorus of lamentation. This was not the theatrical sorrow of mortals. It was the sound of celestial beings tasting true and final despair. They wept for the light they had lost, for the heaven they could never reclaim, and now, for the monstrous children they were condemned to watch perish. They tore at their luminous hair and rent their garments of light, their beautiful forms convulsing with a grief that had no end. They fell to their knees on the cold stone, their faces buried in their hands, no longer gods or masters, but condemned prisoners hearing their sentence for the first time. Enoch stood firm amidst the storm of sorrow, the divine fire within him a bulwark against their overwhelming despair. He felt a flicker of the pity he had witnessed in Raphael, but the righteousness of the judgment held it at bay. This grief was the first down payment on the price of their sin. Finally, Semjaza, their proud leader, stirred. He pushed himself to his feet, his form trembling, his face a mask of utter devastation. The charismatic light that had charmed a generation was gone, replaced by a hollow, pleading darkness. He staggered towards Enoch, not with menace, but with the desperate humility of a beggar. He fell to his knees before the mortal man he had scorned just moments before. Enoch, scribe of righteousness. Semjaza choked out the words, his voice raw with anguish. Is there truly no hope, no mercy? We were blinded, we were foolish, we did not understand the true cost. You understood, Enoch replied, his voice unyielding. You knew the law you were breaking. You bound yourselves by an oath because you feared this very outcome. This is not the fruit of ignorance, but the harvest of rebellion. Another leader, a watcher named Barachiel, who had taught the signs of the lightning, pushed through the crowd. But our sons, he cried, his voice frantic. The Nephilim, they are of our blood. Must they be destroyed? They are mighty and strong. Can they not be spared? They are an abomination. Enoch stated, the words of the judgment scroll flowing from him. They are a fusion of spirit and flesh that was never meant to be. They have no place in the order of creation. Their spirits are born of heaven, but their bodies are of the earth, and they are eternally hungry, eternally violent. They cannot be saved. They can only be erased. And their restless spirits will remain on the earth after their death, becoming the evil specters that will plague mankind until the final cleansing. This revelation was a new twist of the knife. Not only would their children die, but their very essence would become a source of enduring evil. Their legacy was not just destruction, but a perpetual curse upon the world they had sought to rule. It was Azazel who finally rose, his grief quickly curdling into a familiar, defiant rage. The sword he had crafted clattered to the ground as he strode towards Enoch, his eyes burning with a dark fire. Mercy? Hope? He offers none, he roared, his voice echoing across the peaks. He turned to the other weeping watchers. Do you see? The so-called creator is not a god of love, but a tyrant. He creates beings with passion and desire, then condemns them for feeling it. He gives us power, then punishes us for using it. He jabbed a finger at Enoch, and he sends this fragile mortal to gloat over our demise. This is not justice, it is cruelty. A murmur of agreement rippled through some of the fallen. Azazel's defiant words resonated with the last vestiges of their pride, offering a shield of anger against the crushing weight of their despair. So be it, Azazel snarled, his gaze sweeping over his brethren. If we are condemned, let us be condemned for a cause. If we are to be cast into darkness, let us drag this world with us. Let us teach men every dark art we know. Let us arm them, corrupt them, and turn them against each other and their Creator, with such fury that heaven itself will tremble. If we are to have no peace, then neither will he. For a moment it seemed his call to arms might rally them, but the fire of their rebellion had been extinguished by the cold, absolute certainty of their doom. They looked at Azazel, then at Enoch, and in the mortal's unwavering gaze, they saw the futility of any further resistance. They had already fought the throne, and they had already lost. Semjaza, still on his knees, shook his head slowly. It is over, Azazel, your rage is empty. We are finished. He turned his pleading eyes back to Enoch one last time, His voice was no longer that of a king, but of a soul utterly broken. "Enoch," he whispered, "I do not ask for myself. I accept my fate. But I beg you on behalf of all of us, write down our petition, write our prayer for mercy. You are the scribe of righteousness. Your words carry weight. Take our plea back to the one who sits on the throne. Perhaps if it is written by your pure hand, he will look upon it. Beg him for a different fate for our children. Beg him for a quiet end, not a violent one. It is all we ask. One final desperate plea." He bowed his head until his luminous forehead touched the cold, hard rock at Enoch's feet. The other watchers, even the defiant ones who had been swayed by Azazel, followed his lead. The entire host of 200 fallen angels, the proud beings who had seen themselves as gods, were now prostrate before a single mortal man, begging him to be their intercessor. Enoch looked down at the sea of humbled, broken beings. The divine fire within him did not relent, but a sliver of human compassion moved him. Their plea was futile. He knew the judgment was final, but their desperation was real. He was the scribe. It was his duty to record, to witness. He gave a slow, solemn nod. "I will write your petition," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of their doomed hope. "I will record your words of sorrow, but I will make you no promises. I will carry it to the edge of the heavens, but I tell you now what my spirit already knows. The verdict is final. The sentence will not be changed." With Enoch's reluctant agreement, a fragile, desperate hope flickered among the fallen. They rose from their prostrate positions, their movements slow and heavy, like beings moving through deep water. The air on Mount Hermon, once thick with arrogance and then with despair, was now charged with the solemnity of a final, futile rite. Enoch did not need parchment or a chisel. His role as the scribe of righteousness was now an intrinsic part of his being. As the watchers spoke, their words, laden with sorrow and regret, were etched directly into his spiritual memory, forming a document of pure thought and emotion. Semjaza, acting as their spokesman, began the plea. His voice, stripped of its commanding tone, was now a monotone of grief. He recounted their descent, framing it not as a rebellion but as a tragic error born of loneliness and a misguided love for the beauty of creation. He spoke of the daughters of men not as objects of lust, but with a twisted, sorrowful tenderness, describing the illicit unions as a flawed attempt to bridge the gap between heaven and earth. "We saw them, and we were captivated," Semjaza lamented, his words flowing into Enoch's mind. "We saw their brief, flickering lives, their joys, their sorrows. We yearned to be part of it, to share our eternity with their fleeting beauty. We abandoned our high station not for power but for connection. We were wrong. We see that now. We defiled the sacred order." One by one, the other leaders added their voices to the petition. Barachiel, the master of lightning, spoke of how he had only wished to show mankind the awesome power of the skies, not to inspire terror. Kokabiel, the teacher of constellations, claimed he had sought only to share the beauty of the cosmic dance, not to foster the dark art of divination. Each confession was a carefully constructed tapestry of self-justification, woven with threads of genuine regret. They admitted their actions but pleaded for a reinterpretation of their intent. Most surprisingly, Azazel, the architect of war, spoke as well. His earlier defiance had collapsed back into the ocean of despair. His plea was stark and bitter. "I gave them iron," he stated, his voice a low growl. "I taught them to make the earth yield its hardest secrets. I showed them how to be strong, to defend themselves. What crime is there in strength? The Creator made lions with claws and wolves with teeth. I only gave mankind their own." Their collective plea converged on a single point: their children. They begged with an unnerving sincerity for the Nephilim. They described them not as monsters but as their progeny, their legacy. They argued that since their children were born on earth, they belonged to the earth and should not be subject to a celestial judgment. "Let them live out their lives," Semjaza concluded, his voice cracking. "Punish us, for we have sinned. Bind us, imprison us, cast us into the fire as you have decreed. We accept our fate, but spare the innocent. Spare the children. This is our final prayer. Let our punishment be the price for their survival." As the last word of their petition was spoken, a profound silence fell once more. The watchers stared at Enoch, their luminous eyes filled with a desperate, pleading light. They had poured the last vestiges of their hope into this prayer, into this mortal scribe. Enoch felt the full weight of their petition settle within him. It was a masterpiece of sorrowful rhetoric, a poignant and powerful appeal. If he were only a man, his heart would have been moved to compassion, perhaps even to advocate on their behalf. But he was more than a man now. He was a vessel for a justice that was absolute and saw beyond their self-serving words to the rotten core of their transgression. Without another word, he turned his back on them. The assembly of fallen angels watched as he walked to the edge of the precipice, the wind whipping at his simple robes. He did not leap, nor did he climb down. He simply stepped out into the empty air. The two great angels, Uriel and Raphael, who had been waiting unseen, now materialized around him, their light a stark contrast to the dimming auras of the watchers. They caught him, and together they ascended, leaving the fallen stranded on their lonely summit of despair. They did not take him back to the seventh heaven. The throne room was a place of finality, not negotiation. Instead, they took him to the borderlands of the earthly realm, to a place where the waters of the upper firmament met the plains of the mortal world. He found himself standing by the waters of Dan, near the sources of the River Jordan, a place considered a gateway between worlds. Here, Uriel and Raphael instructed him to rest, to sleep. "Present the petition in your vision," Uriel commanded. "The Lord of Spirits will hear it, even from here. The answer will be given to you in a dream." Exhausted by the immense spiritual and emotional burden of his journey, Enoch lay down upon the grass. As he closed his eyes, the world dissolved not into sleep, but into a formal vision. He found himself standing once more in a celestial court, though not the throne room itself. Before him were the scrolls of judgment, glowing with impartial light. He presented the watcher's plea, not in his own voice, but by unfurling the mental scroll he had recorded. The words of Semjaza and Azazel filled the visionary space, their tones of sorrow and desperate logic echoing in the void. He watched as the scales of divine justice appeared before him. On one side, he placed the heartfelt, tragic petition of the fallen. The scale barely moved. On the other side, visions began to appear, placed there by an unseen hand. He saw the terror in the eyes of women being taken by the watchers. He saw men murdering their brothers with the first iron swords. He saw the Nephilim, their giant forms casting blood-red shadows, tearing people apart and devouring them. He saw the very soil of the earth crying out, stained and choked with innocent blood. He saw the corruption, the sorcery, the injustice, the vanity, the utter chaos they had unleashed, not as a mistake, but as a direct consequence of their selfish choices. The scales slammed down on the side of judgment, with a force that shook the foundations of his vision. The answer came not as a voice, but as a cold, absolute certainty that filled his being. Enoch awoke with a start, the morning sun on his face. He sat up, the dream as real and vivid as the waking world around him. He knew the answer. It was the same answer he had been given before, but now it was reinforced, sealed by the rejection of their final appeal. He knew he had to return to them one last time, not to offer hope, but to extinguish it completely. The return journey to Mount Hermon was a heavy one. Enoch was no longer buoyed by the fire of a new and terrible revelation. Now, he was the bearer of a confirmed doom, a messenger tasked with crushing the last spark of hope in beings who were already condemned. Uriel and Raphael guided him once more, their presence a silent, solemn escort. They moved through the earthly ether, arriving again at the windswept summit where the fallen waited. The watchers were exactly as he had left them, a congregation of silent, anxious statues. They had not moved, had not spoken. They stood facing the direction Enoch had departed, their collective will focused on his return, their existence hanging in the balance of the message he carried. As his form, flanked by the two archangels, materialized on the precipice, a shudder of anticipation went through the assembly. This time, there were no jeers, no challenges. They looked upon him with the raw, desperate eyes of defendants awaiting a final verdict. Semjaza stepped forward, his luminous form flickering with nervous energy. He did not dare to speak, but his question was plain in his imploring gaze. Enoch walked into their midst once more. The air was thick with their desperate hope. He felt it pushing against him, a tangible force of pleading and prayer. It made what he had to say all the more brutal. He looked at Semjaza, at Azazel, at the faces of all 200, and he began to speak. His voice was not filled with the thunderous authority of his first visit. It was quiet, somber, and filled with an inescapable finality, like the sound of a tomb door being sealed. "I fell asleep at the waters of Dan," he began, recounting his vision, "and I dreamt. In my dream, I stood before the scales of judgment. I presented your petition. I laid out your sorrow, your pleas for your children, your justifications for your deeds." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. He could see the flicker of hope ignite in their eyes. He was about to extinguish it. "And the Lord of Spirits heard your prayer," Enoch continued. "He has sent me back with his answer." He let his gaze sweep across each of their anxious faces before delivering the blow. "Your petition is rejected. Your prayer is denied. There will be no mercy. There will be no peace for you. Not now, not ever." If his first pronouncement had brought a storm of grief, this one brought a chilling, absolute stillness. It was the silence of a hope so completely annihilated that not even despair could find a voice. Their luminous forms seemed to dim, the very light of their being shrinking inward as if mortally wounded. "You have the audacity to petition for others." Enoch's voice grew stronger, taking on the stern, accusatory tone from his vision. "When you yourselves have forsaken your eternal home and defiled yourselves with the daughters of men, you, who were spiritual, holy, and possessors of eternal life, have stained your souls with the blood of women, have begotten children with mortal blood, have lusted after the flesh of men, and have done as the children of the earth do, who are destined only for death and decay." He pointed a finger at Semjaza. "You were given stewardship over humanity, not ownership of it. You were meant to be celestial spirits, but you chose to become beings of flesh and blood. Therefore, you were not given wives, for the dwelling of the spiritual is in heaven." He then turned his burning gaze on the entire assembly. "And now you weep and pray for your sons, the giants, the fruit of your sin. But they are a greater transgression still. They are spirits proceeding from you. But they are giants upon the earth, and upon the earth shall be their dwelling. They are an unnatural creation, and evil spirits will proceed from their flesh. They will bring slaughter, destruction, and oppression to the world. They will battle and feast and leave no trace but ruin. And they will not be held accountable until the day of the great slaughter, the day of the consummation of the age. As for you," his voice dropped again, each word a hammer blow, "from this day forward you shall not ascend into heaven. You will be bound, imprisoned within the earth, for all the days of the world. And before that, you will witness the beloved children for whom you prayed being destroyed. You will see their ruin, and you will possess nothing. Your pleas for them will be in vain, even if you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the petition I wrote." The finality of the sentence was absolute. He had not only confirmed their fate, but had used their own pleas against them, exposing the hypocrisy at the heart of their sorrow. They had not mourned their sin, only its consequences. The vision of the scales appeared in Enoch's mind, and he described it to them in stark detail, their eloquent prayer on one side, weightless as a feather, and the torrent of blood, violence, and corruption they had unleashed on the other, weighing it down like a mountain of lead. "The earth itself has accused you," Enoch concluded, his voice resonating with the pain of the world. "The blood of the righteous cries out from the ground, from the foundation of the world to the gates of heaven. The souls of the dead cry out, and their plea has been heard above yours. Your time as gods is over. Your age of terror is at an end." He finished speaking. There was no more to be said. The judgment was delivered, confirmed, and sealed. A great trembling began among the watchers. It was not a trembling of grief this time, but of a power being forcibly stripped away. The celestial light that defined their forms began to flicker violently. Their connection to the higher heavens, already tenuous, was now being severed completely. They cried out, not in sorrow but in primal agony, as their very nature was being forcibly altered. Their divine grace was being burned away, leaving only their corrupted power and their eternal shame. Azazel was the first to fall, his body convulsing as if struck by an invisible lightning bolt. He collapsed to the ground, his proud form writhing as unseen chains of spiritual darkness began to bind him. Semjaza fell next, his face a mask of horrified disbelief as he felt his immortal strength draining away. One by one, all 200 of the watchers were struck down, their cries of anguish echoing through the desolate peaks of Mount Hermon. Enoch watched, his face grim, his heart heavy but resolute. This was the beginning of their sentence. The righteous judgment of the Creator had begun to unfold. He had been the witness, the scribe, and the herald. His task here was done. As the last of the fallen angels collapsed under the weight of their sentence, Uriel and Raphael gently guided Enoch away, leaving Mount Hermon to the echoes of their pain and the dawn of a new, terrible age for the world below. With his mission to the fallen watchers complete, Enoch was not returned to the celestial realms. His work as a witness was far from over. Uriel and Raphael guided his spirit away from the desolate peak of Mount Hermon, carrying him not upwards but across the face of the world. They wanted him to see with his own eyes the full extent of the corruption, the living, breathing consequences of the Watcher's sin. The judgment you delivered is not merely for the future. Uriel's voice resonated in his mind, stark and clear. It is already in motion. The first part of their sentence, watch the destruction of their children, is beginning. You must witness this too. You must record the nature of the plague they have unleashed. They descended from the cold, thin air of the mountains into the thick, humid atmosphere of the lowlands. The world below was a panorama of unnatural growth and grotesque vitality. The gifts of the Watchers had been like a potent fertilizer on a field of weeds. Cities, once humble collections of stone and wood like Aethelberg, had metastasized into sprawling, chaotic megalopolises. The smoke from thousands of forges, fueled by Azazel's forbidden knowledge, choked the sky, casting a permanent, greasy twilight over the land. The sounds were a constant cacophony, the clang of hammers on anvils, the shouts of ambitious merchants, and the distant, unsettling roars of things that should not be. But it was the children who were the most horrifying testament to the Watcher's crime. The Nephilim. Enoch had heard them described, had seen their fate on the scales of justice, but to behold them was a different kind of terror. They were not simply large men, they were monstrosities, mockeries of the divine and human forms. In their youth, they were beautiful, possessing the luminous grace of their angelic fathers and the vibrant life of their human mothers. But this beauty was a deceptive shell. They grew at an alarming rate, their bodies unable to contain the potent, volatile fusion of celestial and terrestrial life force. By adulthood, they stood 3, 4, even 5 times the height of a normal man, their limbs elongated and disproportionate. Their strength was legendary. A single Nephilim could uproot an ancient tree with one hand or shatter a stone wall with a casual blow. Their appetites were as vast as their bodies. At first, humanity had been enthralled by them. These magnificent demigods were celebrated, revered as the offspring of the gods who had come from the sky. The burgeoning cities fed them, clothed them, and labored to satisfy their every whim. The Nephilim became the enforcers for corrupt kings, the champions in brutal gladiatorial games, and the ultimate symbols of the new age of power. But the earth could not sustain them. Enoch was shown a great city, larger and more decadent than his own Aethelberg. A grand feast was being held in a central square. He watched as entire herds of cattle, flocks of sheep, and granaries of wheat were brought forth, a day's worth of food for 10,000 men, all to feed a dozen of the giants who sat lolling on cushioned platforms. They consumed everything, their hunger a bottomless pit. When the food was gone, they roared for more, their voices shaking the foundations of the buildings. The human population, once their willing servants, had become their slaves, toiling endlessly to satisfy an insatiable hunger. The fields were stripped bare, the rivers fished to emptiness. Famine began to stalk the land, a direct result of the giants' gluttony. Then, as Enoch watched in horror, the prophecy began to unfold. When the last of the grain was gone and the last of the livestock devoured, the Nephilim turned their terrible hunger upon their providers. One of the giants, enraged by the lack of food, seized the man who had been serving him and, with a horrifying crunch, bit off his head. Panic erupted. Humans screamed and scattered as the other giants, their eyes glowing with a primal predatory light, rose to their feet. The feast was not over. The menu had simply changed. A tide of carnage washed over the city. The Nephilim, their celestial grace completely consumed by a monstrous bloodlust, began to hunt and devour humans. They tore people from their homes, swatted aside soldiers armed with Azazel's iron swords as if they were flies, and feasted on human flesh in the open streets. The very beings who had been worshipped as saviors were now revealed as the ultimate predators. This is the first reaping. Raphael's voice was a whisper of profound sorrow beside Enoch. The hunger that drives them is not of the body alone. It is a spiritual void. They are a paradox, a fusion of two worlds belonging to neither. They try to fill the emptiness inside them with consumption, but it can never be filled. The violence was not confined to one city. Enoch was shown visions of the entire world. Everywhere the Nephilim were turning on their creators. They hunted in the forests, stalked the plains, and waded into the seas, consuming not only men, but beasts, birds, and fish, until the natural world began to groan under the strain of their destructive appetites. But the ultimate horror was yet to come. As the supply of other life dwindled, the spirit of madness that Enoch had prophesied descended upon them fully. The Nephilim, their hunger still raging, turned on the only source of sustenance left. Each other, Enoch, witnessed a battle between two of the giants that leveled an entire forest. They tore at each other with brutish strength, their roars of fury and pain echoing for miles. It was a clumsy, horrifying brawl, devoid of skill or strategy, driven by nothing but pure cannibalistic instinct. The victor, bleeding from 100 wounds, did not celebrate. It immediately fell upon the corpse of its rival and began to feast. This was the beginning of their self-destruction. The Watchers, trapped and powerless on their mountain or already being bound beneath the earth, were forced to witness this through their spiritual connection to their children. They were experiencing every moment of their monstrous offspring's degradation, their love curdling into an unending agony. This was a torment more exquisitely cruel than any physical chain. Enoch watched, his soul numb with horror. This was the world without divine order. This was the consequence of taking knowledge without wisdom, of seeking power without humility. It was not a world of enlightened progress, but a primordial slaughterhouse, a planet eating itself alive. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that this was only the beginning. The carnage of the giants was but the prelude to the cleansing that must inevitably follow. The Great Flood was no longer a distant prophecy. It was a looming, terrible necessity. The spectacle of the Nephilim's self-destruction was a horror that resonated on a cosmic scale. But as Enoch's consciousness was guided by the archangels, he became aware of another, deeper sound beneath the roars of the giants and the screams of their victims. It was a sound of immense, ancient pain. It was the sound of the earth itself, weeping. Uriel, the angel of light and divine order, turned Enoch's attention away from the bloody carnage and towards the very fabric of the world. "Listen, scribe." His voice was not a sound, but a direct impression on Enoch's soul. "Listen not with your ears, but with your spirit. The sin of the Watchers and their brood has done more than spill blood. It has poisoned the creation itself." Enoch focused, pushing past the surface-level chaos. He felt a profound, sickening vibration. He felt the agony of the forests as they were ripped apart, the sorrow of the mountains as they were stained with innocent blood, and the choking despair of the rivers as they were clogged with the dead. The world, which had once existed in a state of balanced, harmonious life, was now screaming in silent spiritual torment. He was then shown a vision that transcended physical sight. He saw the life force of the planet, a gentle green and gold energy that flowed through every living thing, from the smallest blade of grass to the mightiest beast. Now this vibrant energy was being corrupted, turning a bruised, sickly purple-black in the areas where the Nephilim's violence was most concentrated. Their unnatural existence was a metaphysical cancer, and the earth was dying from it. And then he heard the voices. They were not human. They were the collective cries of the souls of the dead, the innocent who had been slaughtered. Their spirits, unable to find rest in a world so defiled, clung to the site of their demise, their voices rising in a chorus of accusation. "How long, O Holy One?" a voice cried from a field where farmers had been devoured. "How long will our blood cry out from the ground with no answer?" "Justice!" shrieked another voice from the ruins of a city. "We were slain by the children of heaven. Who will avenge us?" These cries were not unheard. Enoch was lifted high above the blighted landscape, and he saw that these pleas, these shimmering threads of grief and outrage, were ascending. They rose past the smoke-choked skies, past the domain of the corrupted stars, and were being gathered. He saw four colossal, luminous figures standing at the four corners of the world, their forms reaching from the earth to the heavens. They were the archangels, the chief princes of the heavenly host, in their true cosmic forms. He recognized Raphael, whose presence was a soothing balm. He saw Michael, whose aura radiated immense power and unshakable resolve, a warrior's light. He saw Gabriel, the messenger, whose light pulsed with divine truth. And he saw Uriel, his guide, the embodiment of the sacred fire of knowledge and order. They were listening. Their faces, beautiful and terrible to behold, were turned downwards, filled with a righteous sorrow as they received the unending stream of pleas from the tormented earth and its murdered inhabitants. They were acting as celestial conductors, gathering the cries of the afflicted and channeling them towards the throne. Enoch was brought before them, a humble witness to their divine counsel. The earth, once a garden, has been made desolate, Gabriel declared, his voice like the sound of 1,000 trumpets. It petitions the gate of heaven, its cries rising to us from the blood that has been shed. Raphael, his voice filled with healing sorrow, spoke next. The souls of men cry out, "Bring our cause before the Most High." They plead for justice against those who have destroyed them. Michael, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword forged from a single star, spoke with cold, hard fury. We see the violence. We see the secrets that Azazel has brought forth. He taught men to make swords of war and bracelets of vanity. He showed them the artifice of deception, corrupting them body and soul. The world is filled with the works of a fallen angel. Uriel, his eyes burning with the fire of pure law, concluded the indictment. And Semjaza, to whom you gave authority, has led his legion astray. They have gone unto the daughters of men, defiled themselves, and revealed to them every kind of sin. And the women have borne giants, whose wickedness now consumes the very world they walk upon. The law is broken, the order is shattered. Having gathered the full testimony of a broken world, the 4 archangels turned their faces upward, toward the unseen 7th heaven. Together their voices joined in a single powerful plea, a formal petition to the Lord of Spirits. You, O Lord of Lords, God of Gods, King of Kings, they entreated, your glorious throne endures for all generations. You have made all things, and power over all things is yours. Nothing is hidden from your sight. You see what Azazel has done, how he has taught all unrighteousness on earth and revealed the eternal secrets which were made in heaven. You see what Semjaza has done, how he has used the authority you gave him to lead his followers into sin. They have spawned a brood of monsters that fill the earth with blood, and the souls of the dead cry out to you. Now therefore, O Lord, we do not petition for them. We petition for the world you have made. Act now, send forth your judgment, for you know all things before they come to pass. You see their sin, and you permit it. Tell us, what are we to do with them? Their plea hung in the cosmic silence, a formal request for a final command. They were the instruments of divine will, but the order to act, the order to unleash the final cleansing judgment, had to come from the source of all authority. Enoch watched, understanding now the full chain of cosmic justice. It did not begin with a capricious whim of God. It began with the cries of the victims. It was amplified by the tormented earth. It was gathered and presented by the archangels. And only then, when the case was fully made and the evidence undeniable, would the final sentence be executed. The great flood was not an act of divine anger. It was an answer to a prayer, a terrible necessary surgery to save the creation from a cancer that would otherwise consume it entirely. In the wake of the archangel's powerful plea, a silence fell that was more profound than any sound. It was the silence of a universe holding its breath, awaiting the ultimate decree. Enoch, suspended in the celestial space beside the 4 great princes, felt the shift, a wave of immense ancient power. The same power he had felt in the throne room of the 7th heaven, washed down through the cosmos. It was the voice of the Ancient of Days, not as spoken words, but as a direct, irrefutable impartation of will. The command was given. The judgment, which Enoch had delivered as a prophecy, was now to become reality. The time for observation was over. The time for intervention had come. The divine mandate was distributed among the archangels, each given a specific and terrible task in the great and awful cleansing to come. Their council of witness was now a council of war. The first command was given to Uriel, the light of God, the keeper of sacred order. Go to the son of Lamech. The divine thought impressed upon him, and Enoch's heart leaped, for he knew it spoke of his own lineage, and revealed to him what is to come. Show him the end that is approaching, that the whole earth will be destroyed. A deluge is about to come upon the entire world and will wipe away all that is on it. Instruct him how he may escape, so that his seed may be preserved for all generations. For from him a new world will be born, righteous and clean. Enoch felt a surge of profound relief and sorrow. Noah, his great-grandson, the strange, luminous child whose birth had caused such fear and wonder, was to be the vessel of salvation. His family line, his own blood, would be the thread of continuity through the coming cataclysm. But this salvation came at the cost of the entire world he knew. Next, the divine will turn to Raphael, the healer of God, whose task was paradoxically one of punishment. Go, Raphael, and bind Azazel hand and foot. Cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert which is in Dudiel, and cast him in there. Place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever. Cover his face that he may not see the light. And on the great day of judgment he shall be cast into the fire. And then the command softened slightly. Heal the earth which the angels have corrupted. Proclaim the healing of the earth, that I will heal it from this plague, and that not all the sons of men may perish through the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and taught their sons. The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. Raphael bowed his head in acceptance, his sorrowful duty clear. He was to be both jailer to the chief architect of ruin and the herald of the world's eventual recovery. The mandate then fell upon Gabriel, the herald of God, who had stood at the council of woe. Proceed, Gabriel, against the bastards and the reprobates, and against the children of fornication. Destroy the children of fornication and the children of the watchers from amongst men. Send them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. For length of days shall they not have. No request that their fathers make of you on their behalf shall be granted, for they hope for eternal life, but they will each live only 500 years. Gabriel's task was to accelerate the Nephilim's self-destruction, to fan the flames of their madness until their prophecy of mutual annihilation was fulfilled swiftly and completely. He was to be the divine agent of their bloody end. Finally, the greatest and most terrible charge was given to Michael, the commander of the heavenly host, the viceroy of the Lord of Spirits. Go, Michael, bind Semjaza and his associates, who have united themselves with women so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, until the day of their judgment and of their consummation, until the judgment that is forever and ever is consummated. In those days they shall be led off to the abyss of fire, to the torment and the prison in which they shall be confined forever. Michael's face was grim, resolute. He was to be the one to personally bind the leader of the fallen and all his followers, to imprison them and ensure their sentence was carried out to the letter. His role was the final lock on the prison door of the condemned. And then, the final part of Michael's command resonated through all of them. Destroy all the spirits of the reprobate and the children of the watchers, because they have wronged mankind. Destroy all wrong from the face of the earth, and let every evil work come to an end. Let the plant of righteousness and truth appear. It shall be a blessing. The works of righteousness and truth shall be planted in truth and joy forevermore. The vision was clear. The destruction was not an end in itself. It was a ploughing of the field, a violent, necessary tilling of the soil so that something new and pure could be planted. The archangels their orders received did not hesitate. With a final, solemn look at one another, they dispersed. It was a moment of immense cosmic significance. The gears of divine judgment, which had been slowly turning, now engaged with full and terrible force. Raphael vanished in a streak of healing green light, heading for the desert to find Azazel. Gabriel departed in a flash of white, descending toward the battlefields of the giants. Uriel turned his gaze towards the land of Eden, where Noah now lived, preparing to deliver the warning that would save humanity's future. And Michael, his starry sword now drawn and blazing with cold, righteous fire, began his descent towards the dark valleys where he would imprison the 70 generations of the damned. Enoch remained, suspended in the void, his purpose as a witness to the judgment now complete. He had seen the crime, heard the plea, delivered the sentence, and now witnessed the dispatch of the executioners. His heart was a storm of conflicting emotions, sorrow for the world that would be lost, terror at the awesome power of the judgment, and a fragile, flickering hope for the plant of righteousness that was promised to come. His journey was not over, but a major chapter had closed. The fate of the antediluvian world was sealed. The flood was coming, with the archangels dispatched to execute their grim duties. Enoch's own purpose shifted. His role as a heavenly witness was temporarily suspended. The great cosmic drama would now play out on the earthly stage, and he was to be returned to the thread of his own lineage, to the very family that held the key to the future. His consciousness was gently guided back, not to the bustling, corrupted city of Aethelberg, but to a quieter, more pastoral land far to the east. This was the land where his son Methuselah, and in turn his grandson Lamech, had settled, trying to preserve a semblance of the old ways, far from the epicenters of the Watcher's influence. Enoch's spirit reintegrated with his physical form, which had been preserved, sleeping in a hidden cave known only to the angels. The sensation of returning to flesh and bone was jarring. The weight, the limitations, the dullness of mortal sense, it was all a stark contrast to the freedom of his spiritual journeys. He awoke feeling the immense weight of the eons he had witnessed. He made his way to the settlement of his family. It was a humble place of sturdy wooden homes and well-tended fields, an island of relative peace in a world descending into madness. But even here, the shadow of the fallen had reached. He saw men with eyes full of a new, hard ambition, and he heard whispers of the strange new powers and gods that held sway in the western cities. He was greeted by his son, Methuselah, now an old man himself, his face a roadmap of worry. "Father," he cried, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and reverence. Enoch had been gone for what seemed like a lifetime, presumed lost to the mountains or taken by the Creator. "I have returned, my son," Enoch said, his voice weary but firm. "I bring tidings both terrible and hopeful." But before he could explain, a commotion from the largest house in the settlement drew their attention. It was the home of Lamech, Enoch's grandson. Men and women were gathered outside, their faces a mixture of awe and profound fear, staring at the doorway from which a soft, unnatural light was emanating. Lamech himself burst out of the house, his face pale, his body trembling. He was a good man, but a man of simple faith, and what was happening in his home was beyond his comprehension. He saw his grandfather, Enoch, and rushed to him, falling to his knees. "Grandfather, you have returned at the hour of a strange and terrible miracle," Lamech gasped. "My wife, Batanosh, has borne a son, but he is not like us. He is not of the seed of men." Enoch, knowing what Uriel was tasked to do, felt his heart beat faster. He knew who this child was. "Let me see him, Lamech," he said gently. Lamech led his grandfather and father into his home. The interior was filled with a soft white light, and it was not coming from any lamp. In a small wooden cradle lay a newborn infant, and the child was glowing. His body was as white as the purest snow and as red as the bloom of a rose. The hair on his head was white as wool and long, but it was his eyes that were most astonishing. When he opened them, they shone like the sun, and the entire house was illuminated with a brilliant, holy light. The baby did not cry like a normal infant. He was silent, his gaze filled with an ancient, unsettling wisdom. "Do you see?" Lamech whispered, his voice full of terror. "His form is not our form, his light is not our light. I fear he is the child of one of the fallen ones, one of the angels of heaven. My heart is full of dread. I have begotten a son who is not human, but a prelude to some great sorrow for the earth." But Tenosh, Lamech's wife, was weeping in a corner, swearing she had known no other man. Enoch walked to the cradle and looked down at his great-grandson. He saw the child not just with his mortal eyes, but with the spiritual sight he now possessed. He saw the pure, untainted soul within the luminous flesh. He saw the mark of divine selection upon him. This was not a Nephilim. This was something else entirely. This was hope. He placed a hand gently on Lamech's shoulder. "Peace, my son." Enoch's voice was full of an authority that calmed Lamech's frantic heart. "Your fears are understandable, but they are misplaced. I have journeyed far and seen the plans of the Most High. I know the truth of this child." He turned to face his family, his voice taking on the resonance of the herald he had become. "A great and terrible judgment is coming to the world. The corruption you see in the western cities, the violence of the giants, the wickedness of men, all of it will be washed away. A great deluge will cover the entire earth to destroy all flesh." Gasps of horror filled the room. This was a prophecy more terrible than any they could have imagined. "But the Lord of Spirits is a Lord of mercy as well as judgment," Enoch continued, his gaze returning to the glowing infant. "He has chosen to preserve a seed of righteousness, a new beginning for mankind. This child," he declared, his voice ringing with certainty, "is that seed. He is not the son of a fallen angel. He is the Son of Man, chosen from birth for this purpose. The light you see is the light of the divine blessing upon him. He is marked for salvation, not for destruction. He bent down and looked into the infant's impossibly wise eyes. His name shall be Noah, Enoch proclaimed, for he shall bring comfort to the earth after the devastation. He and his household will be saved. He will be the father of a new world, a world cleansed of the giants and the sins of the watchers. Lamech stared, his fear slowly being replaced by a staggering, overwhelming sense of awe. His strange, terrifying son was not a curse, but the salvation of the world. The burden of fear was lifted from his heart, replaced by the heavy mantle of a divine destiny he could barely comprehend. Just as Enoch finished speaking, a new light, different from the child's, filled the room. It was a warm, golden radiance. The figure of the archangel Uriel stood before them, his form cloaked in a light that was gentle enough for mortal eyes to bear. "He speaks the truth," Uriel said, his voice a harmonious chord. "I am sent to confirm his words and to instruct you, Noah, son of Lamech. Though he addressed the infant, the words were meant for the family. You will be taught to build a vessel of preservation. You will be given the dimensions, the materials, and the knowledge to construct an ark that will withstand the coming wrath. Upon it, you will save your family, and with them, the seed of every clean beast and fowl. You are the covenant, Noah. The future of mankind rests with you." The luminous child in the cradle did not speak, but he reached out a tiny, glowing hand as if in understanding. The fear in the room had been replaced by a sacred, terrifying purpose. The family of Enoch was no longer just a family. They were the custodians of the future, the keepers of the Ark of Life in a world condemned to die. With the truth of Noah's destiny revealed and confirmed by the archangel Uriel, a profound and heavy peace settled over Lamech's household. The fear of the unknown had been replaced by the certainty of a divine, albeit terrifying, plan. Enoch had fulfilled his duty to his family, bridging the gap between their mortal understanding and the cosmic events that were about to unfold. His work, however, was not yet complete. He had one final task before his earthly journey concluded: to commit his visions and knowledge to writing, to create a testament that would survive the flood and serve as a guide and a warning for the new world to come. He withdrew from the daily life of the settlement, secluding himself in the same cave where his body had been preserved. With Methuselah as his faithful attendant, bringing him food and water, Enoch began the monumental task of transcribing his celestial journeys. He worked not with chisel and stone, but with stylus and specially prepared animal hides, writing in a clear, precise script. He wrote of his ascent through the heavens, the storehouses of snow and rain, the prison of the fallen angels, and the paradise prepared for the righteous. He described the throne of the Ancient of Days and the glory of the Son of Man in as much detail as mortal language could bear. He meticulously recorded the crimes of the Watchers, the names of their leaders, the forbidden knowledge they taught, and the divine judgment he had pronounced upon them on Mount Hermon. He chronicled the rise of the Nephilim, their insatiable hunger, and their inevitable bloody end, which was even now playing out across the blighted lands to the west. But he did not only write of the past and the present. The Lord of Spirits had granted him a sweeping vision of the future, a prophetic history of the world from the flood to the final judgment, divided into a great apocalypse of weeks. This was his final, most crucial legacy for his descendants. He called his son Methuselah to the cave and began to dictate this final prophecy. "Hear me, my son," Enoch began, his eyes looking not at Methuselah but at a distant point in time. "I will show you all the visions I have seen, the history of the world divided into 10 weeks. For in each week a different fate is decreed. In the first week," he said, "I was born, the seventh man from Adam, and righteousness and justice dwelt on the earth in those early days. After me in the second week, a great wickedness will arise, and the first end will take place. This will be the great deluge, in which the world will be cleansed. But in it, a Manoah, your grandson, shall be saved, and from him will spring a new plant of righteousness for all generations. In the third week at its close, a man will be chosen as the plant of a righteous judgment. This will be Abraham, and his posterity shall become the plant of righteousness forever. In the fourth week," Enoch continued, his voice gaining momentum, "visions of the holy and righteous will be seen, and a law for all generations and an enclosure will be made for them, the law of Moses at Sinai, and the nation of Israel. In the fifth week, at its close, a house of glory and dominion shall be built forever, the temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. But in this time the people will begin to stray, their eyes blinded to the truth. In the 6th week, the people of that house will fall into blindness. The house will be burned with fire, and the whole race of the chosen root shall be dispersed across the earth, the destruction of the temple and the Babylonian exile. Methuselah listened, his heart heavy, transcribing his father's words with a trembling hand. This was a future filled with as much sorrow as glory. And after that, in the 7th week, Enoch's voice became grim. An apostate generation shall arise. Its deeds will be many, and all of its deeds will be apostate. And at its close the elect shall be chosen as witnesses of the righteous judgment from the eternal plant of righteousness. They will be given 7-fold wisdom and knowledge. Here he hinted at a small, righteous remnant who would preserve the truth in a time of great darkness. Then in the 8th week, the week of righteousness, a sword shall be given to them, that a righteous judgment may be executed on the oppressors, and sinners shall be delivered into the hands of the righteous. At its close, they shall acquire houses through their righteousness, and a house shall be built for the great king in glory forevermore. This spoke of a great victory and a restoration. And after that, in the 9th week, Enoch's gaze intensified. The righteous judgment shall be revealed to the whole world, and all the works of the godless shall vanish from all the earth. The world shall be written down for destruction. Then, in the 10th week, in the 7th part, there shall be the great eternal judgment. His voice rang with ultimate finality. It will be executed on the watchers and all the wicked. The former heaven shall pass away, and a new heaven shall appear. All the powers of the heaven shall give 7-fold light, and after that, there will be many weeks without number forever. And all shall be in goodness and in righteousness, and sin shall no more be mentioned forever. When he finished, the cave was silent, save for the scratching of Methuselah's stylus. The entire history of the world, from its first sin to its final glorious renewal, lay recorded on the scrolls. It was a history of cycles of sin and judgment, of falling and restoration, culminating in a final, perfect age of peace. Enoch looked at his son, his eyes full of a father's love and a prophet's gravity. "Take these scrolls, my son," he said, his voice now gentle. "Preserve them. Teach them to Noah and to his children after him. Let this be a testament to them. Let it be a guide in times of darkness and a promise in times of despair. It will teach them that the path of righteousness, though narrow and difficult, is the only path that leads to life. The path of the sinner, though broad and appealing, leads only to the fire of judgment." He placed his hands on Methuselah's head and gave him his final blessing. "Do not be grieved that you will not live to see the new world. Your righteousness is recorded in heaven. Walk in peace, my son, and teach your children to do the same." Enoch's work on earth was finished. He had been the witness, the herald, the scribe, and the prophet. He had seen heaven and hell, pronounced doom on angels, and charted the future of mankind. He stood up, a sense of peace settling over him. He was ready for his own final journey. With the final prophecy delivered and the scrolls entrusted to Methuselah, a palpable change came over Enoch. The weight of his earthly mission lifted from his shoulders, and the weary lines on his face seemed to smooth away. A faint, silvery light began to emanate from his skin, a reflection of the celestial realms he had traversed. His mortal body was becoming translucent, preparing for its final transformation. He emerged from the cave with Methuselah, who carried the precious scrolls, his heart a mixture of awe and profound sorrow. The people of the settlement gathered, sensing that this was a moment of great and final significance. They saw the light surrounding Enoch and fell back in reverence. Lamech was there, holding the infant Noah, whose own gentle glow seemed to resonate with his great-grandfather's. Enoch gathered his family, his son, his grandson, and the luminous child who held the future. He did not give them a long, sorrowful farewell. His words were calm, practical, and filled with the certainty of the world to come. "The time of my departure is at hand," he said, his voice clear and serene. "Do not mourn for me, for I do not go to the dust of the earth as other men do. The Lord of spirits has decreed that I shall not taste death. I am to be taken up, to serve as a scribe in the heavens until the final judgment." He looked at Lamech. "Raise your son in righteousness. He will face a world of scorn and disbelief. Men will mock him as he builds the vessel of salvation. Give him your strength, for his task is heavy." Then he looked down at the infant Noah, and for the first time a gentle smile touched his lips. He placed his hand on the child's head, a blessing passing between the man who had chronicled the end of the old world and the child who would begin the new one. Upon you rests the covenant, little one. Be strong and righteous, and the Creator will guide your hand." He then addressed the whole assembly. "I am about to be taken from you. In 1 year's time I will return briefly to instruct my son once more. After that, you will not see me again until the great judgment. Live in accordance with the law written on your hearts and in these scrolls. Do not turn to the ways of the cities of the West. Do not be tempted by their power or their dark knowledge, for all of it is destined for destruction." As he spoke, the light around him intensified. The air grew still, and a low, humming vibration could be felt, as if the barrier between the earthly and heavenly realms was growing thin. 2 points of brilliant light appeared in the sky above, descending slowly. The people gasped, shielding their eyes. It was Uriel and Raphael, coming for him as they had at the very beginning of his journey. "Do not be afraid," Enoch said, his voice a calming anchor in the midst of the overwhelming spectacle. "This is the will of the Most High." The 2 archangels descended, their forms less overwhelming than before, cloaked in a light that mortals could bear to witness. They did not speak with words, but their purpose was clear. They stood on either side of Enoch, their presence creating a sacred space around him. Methuselah stepped forward, tears finally streaming down his ancient face. "Father, will we ever see you again?" Enoch looked at his beloved son, the one who had been his faithful anchor to this world. "In the new heaven and the new earth, my son," he said, his voice full of a love that transcended time. "There, all the righteous will be gathered. Until then, be the patriarch your people need. Preserve the truth. My journey is over, and yours is to carry on." With a final look of love and farewell to his family and his world, Enoch nodded to the angels. Uriel and Raphael placed their hands on his shoulders. The light surrounding the 3 of them erupted, not in a blinding flash, but in a column of pure, white, silent fire that reached from the earth to the heavens. Enoch's physical form dissolved within the light, not violently, but as if it were being transformed, sublimated into a being of pure energy. His mortal substance was shed like a worn-out garment, and his eternal spiritual self was revealed. The assembled people watched in utter awe as the column of light, carrying the spirit of Enoch, ascended. It rose smoothly and swiftly, passing through the clouds and into the deep blue of the sky, until it was a single brilliant star that shone for a moment before vanishing into the unseen realms above. Silence descended upon the settlement. They stood staring at the empty sky, the spot where their patriarch had been erased from the earth and written into the heavens. He was gone. The 7th from Adam, the man who walked with God, had been taken. Methuselah clutched the scrolls to his chest. They were all he had left of his father, but they were more than enough. They were the history of the universe and the blueprint for its future. He turned to the people, his face streaked with tears, but his eyes now firm with resolve. "You have witnessed this day," he said, his voice ringing with newfound authority. "You have seen the truth of my father's words. He is with the Creator. Now, our work begins. We must prepare. We must hold fast to the path of righteousness. For the judgment he spoke of is not just a story. It is a promise. And the flood is coming." The age of prophecy was over. The age of preparation had begun. The family of Enoch, the last righteous remnant in a condemned world, turned their faces toward the future, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of the coming destruction, but firm in the promise of the ark and the new world that lay beyond the waters of the great deluge. True to his word, Enoch reappeared 1 year later. His return was not a grand spectacle, but a quiet, personal visit to Methuselah, imparting final instructions and reaffirmations. Then, he was gone for good, his place in the earthly realm vacant forever. The scrolls he had written became the bedrock of his family's faith, a constant, sobering reminder of the world's impending doom and their unique role within it. Years turned into decades. Methuselah grew old and passed his wisdom and the scrolls to Lamech. Lamech in turn dedicated his life to teaching his luminous son Noah. Noah grew from a glowing child into a man of quiet strength and profound righteousness. The unearthly light of his infancy softened, contained within him as an inner fire of unwavering faith. He walked in the ways of his great-grandfather, a man apart from the world, his gaze often fixed on the heavens, listening for a command that he knew would one day come. All the while, the world beyond their peaceful enclave continued its descent into madness. The prophecy of Gabriel had been fulfilled. The Nephilim, driven by an insatiable cannibalistic fury, had all but wiped each other out. Their final titanic battles scarred the landscape, leaving behind valleys of broken bones and fields littered with their colossal remains. The earth was rid of the giants, but their legacy, the evil spirits that arose from their corpses, lingered. These unseen specters whispered into the hearts of men, fanning the flames of greed, violence, and depravity that the Watchers had first ignited. The world had become a living hell. Without the giants to serve, men turned their swords on each other. The knowledge of metallurgy Azazel had taught was perfected for a single purpose: warfare. Nations of men, led by petty tyrants and sorcerer priests, clashed in endless bloody conflicts. The arts of seduction and vanity had poisoned all relationships. Trust was a forgotten virtue. Brother betrayed brother for a handful of silver. Cities waged war over insults. The earth groaned under the weight of ceaseless, pointless bloodshed. And then, the second phase of the judgment began. It started subtly. The precise clockwork rhythm of the heavens, which Uriel had shown Enoch, began to falter. The sun seemed to burn with a harsher, more punishing heat, baking the fields and drying the rivers. Seasons became unpredictable. Rains failed to come, and long, brutal droughts turned fertile plains into dust bowls. Then torrential, unseasonable storms would lash the earth, causing flash floods that washed away crops and villages, only to be followed by more searing heat. The natural order, the divine law, was being withdrawn. The careful balance that sustained life was being purposefully unraveled. This was the work of the archangels, carrying out the mandate of the throne. It was a gradual strangulation of the world's life support systems. Famine, more severe than any caused by the Nephilim, gripped the land. People starved in their magnificent, decadent cities. They gnawed on leather and tree bark, their bodies wasting away. The violence escalated. Men killed for a single loaf of bread, for a mouthful of water. The civilization built by the Watcher's knowledge was collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. High on his lonely prison peak, Azazel, bound in darkness beneath the rocks of Dudael, could feel the world he had corrupted dying, and he raged in impotent fury. In the valleys of the earth, Semjaza and his followers, chained and powerless, felt the agony of the world as a mirror to their own, an eternal torment with no hope of reprieve. In the land of Eden, Noah and his family watched these events with heavy hearts. Travelers brought tales of the chaos of cities where the dead lay unburied in the streets, of fields of skeletons, and of a sky that was either a brassy, unforgiving shield or a source of violent, destructive rain. They knew this was the prelude. This was the world being prepared for its final baptism of water. Then the command came. One evening, as Noah prayed, the voice of the Creator, the same that had spoken to Enoch in the seventh heaven, filled his mind. It was not a conversation, it was a set of direct, precise instructions. The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. The voice then gave him the dimensions of vessel of immense, almost unbelievable size. 300 cubits in length, 50 in breadth, and 30 in height. It was to have a lower, second, and third story, with a single great window near the roof and one door in its side. The voice continued, outlining the covenant. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons and thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee. He was commanded to bring 2 of every sort of living creature, male and female, into the ark to keep them alive. Of the clean beasts and of the birds of the air he was to take 7 pairs. And finally, he was to gather and store every kind of food that was eaten, enough to sustain his family and the entire menagerie for a long and indefinite period. The final command was a ticking clock. For yet 7 days, and I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living substance that I have made will I destroy from off the face of the earth. Noah rose from his prayer, his body trembling not with fear, but with the awesome gravity of his task. He gathered his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, their wives, and his own wife, Naamah. He opened the scrolls of Enoch and showed them the prophecies. He relayed the divine command he had just received. There was no questioning, no hesitation. Their entire lives had been a preparation for this moment. They were a family united by a sacred, terrible purpose. The next day, under the strange, sickly light of the dying world's sun, they began their work. Noah, the righteous man, the preacher of a judgment no one else would hear, picked up his axe and struck the first blow against the tall gopher wood. The building of the ark had begun. The construction of the ark was an act of audacious, lunatic faith in the eyes of the world. Noah's settlement, once an isolated curiosity, became a focal point of mockery and scorn. As the massive skeleton of the vessel began to take shape on the plains, far from any sea, travelers and local tribesmen came to gaze and to jeer. The world outside was dying, but it was dying with a snarl of defiance. The famines and plagues had not brought men to repentance. They had hardened their hearts. They clung to the dark arts and violent ways taught by the Watchers, blaming their misfortunes on rival gods, bad omens, or the weakness of their neighbors, anything but their own wickedness. In Noah's colossal landlocked boat, they found a perfect target for their frustration and disbelief. "Look at the madman," they would shout from a safe distance, their voices dripping with contempt. "He builds a ship for a desert. Has the sun baked his brain? He says a flood is coming." Another would laugh, kicking up a cloud of dust from the parched earth. "I see no water here, old man, only the dust of a forgotten god." Sorcerer priests from the nearby towns, their power threatened by this prophet of a single, all-powerful creator, came to perform rituals of cursing against the project. They chanted, drew sigils in the dirt, and called upon the spirits of the Nephilim to strike down Noah and his family. But an unseen barrier of divine protection, a shield woven by the watchful archangels, surrounded the construction site. Their curses dissolved into nothingness, their incantations turning to garbled nonsense on their lips, which only fueled their hatred further. Noah and his son Shem, the thoughtful craftsman, Ham, the strong and impetuous, and Japheth the far-seeing dreamer labored on, ignoring the taunts. Their work was a prayer, a symphony of focused effort. The rhythmic blows of their hammers, the rasp of saws through gopher wood, the bubbling of pitch in great cauldrons, these were the only sounds they acknowledged. Their wives, led by the steadfast Naamah, worked just as tirelessly, gathering and preparing the immense stores of food, weaving fabrics, and tending to the small details of the floating world they were creating. Noah did not remain silent. He was not just a builder, he was the world's last preacher. When the crowds of scorners gathered, he would pause in his work, his face earnest and his eyes filled with a sorrowful urgency, and he would plead with them. "Turn from your wicked ways," he would call out, his voice carrying over the plains. "The Creator is long, suffering, but his patience has an end. The heavens will open and the fountains of the deep will break forth. Judgment is coming for the violence and corruption that have filled the earth. The ark is your only refuge. Repent and be saved." His words were met with stones and laughter. He was a relic from a forgotten age, speaking of a forgotten morality. They saw his righteousness not as a virtue, but as a weakness, an arrogant rejection of the new age of power and knowledge. One day, a warlord named Tubal, a man who had forged a small empire through the brutal application of Azazel's weaponry, rode up to the site with his retinue. His armor was of polished black iron, and his face was a mask of cruel confidence. He looked at the massive ark and then at Noah. "Old man," Tubal sneered, "I hear you speak of a coming destruction, but I am destruction. My sword is the only judgment this world needs. Why do you waste your time with this wooden folly when you could serve a real power? Join me. Your God is silent and distant. My gods of iron and fire answer me every day." Noah looked at the warlord, seeing in his eyes the empty, prideful darkness of the fallen ones he served. "The power you wield is a fleeting illusion, son of Cain," Noah replied, his voice calm and steady. "It is the power of death and decay. The God I serve is the God of life. Your iron will rust, your empire will turn to dust, but his covenant will endure." Enraged by the quiet defiance, Tubal drew his sword. "Your God will not save you from my steel." But as he urged his horse forward, the animal reared up, screaming in terror, its eyes wide with a fear of something Tubal could not see. The warlord was thrown to the ground. Shaken and humiliated, he and his men retreated, shouting curses and threats of a fiery return. They never came back. As the years passed and the ark neared completion, the second part of the divine command began to unfold. A strange and silent migration started. From out of the dying forests, across the barren plains, and down from the blighted mountains, the animals came. They came not as a frightened, chaotic herd, but in an orderly procession, guided by an unseen hand. Lions walked peacefully beside lambs, wolves padded along next to deer, and great serpents slithered in the dust behind lumbering elephants. They came in pairs, male and female, their natural enmity suspended by a divine truce. Birds of every kind darkened the sky, circling above the ark before landing gently near the great door. The scorners watched this procession with a new kind of fear. This was a miracle they could not deny, a sight so unnatural it defied all explanation. Their mockery faltered, replaced by a sullen, uneasy silence. A few felt the first stirrings of true dread, a cold knot in their stomachs that whispered that the madman might have been right all along. Noah and his family opened the great door and guided the creatures inside. The interior of the ark, a marvel of divine architecture, was filled with stalls, pens, and roosts, perfectly designed for its inhabitants. The animals entered without panic, settling into their designated places as if returning to a home they had always known. 7 pairs of the clean animals, the sheep, the cattle, the doves, brought in last. Their future sacrifice, a seed of the worship that would sanctify the new world. Finally, after 120 years of labor, the work was done. The last of the food was stored, the last of the animals secured. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons and their wives stood at the entrance of the gigantic vessel, looking out at the world for the last time. The sky was a strange, bruised color, and the air was ominously still. The crowds of mockers were gone, having retreated to their homes, unnerved by the silent exodus of the beasts. The voice of the Creator spoke one final time in Noah's mind. The 7 days have passed. Come thou and all thy house into the ark, for the time is now. Noah looked at his family, their faces grim but resolute. They had kept the faith. They had finished the work. He took one last look at the world of his birth, the familiar hills, the sky, the very ground beneath his feet, all of it condemned. A single tear traced a path through the sawdust on his cheek. Then he turned and led his family up the great ramp and into the cavernous safety of the ark. They were 8 souls against a world of billions, a tiny island of life in an ocean of impending death. The moment Noah and his family crossed the threshold, the great ramp seemed to lift of its own accord, retracting into the hull of the ark. Then, with a deep, resonant boom that shook the very ground, the massive door swung shut. It was not closed by human hands or by any mechanism Noah had built. An unseen, divine force sealed it from the outside, the pitch on its edges fusing together, making it an impenetrable part of the monolithic structure. Plunged into a sudden deep twilight, the family stood in the echoing silence of the main hold. The only light came from the single long window high above, which cast a dim, eerie glow over the vast interior. The only sounds were the soft rustling and breathing of the countless creatures in their stalls, a chorus of life waiting in suspended animation. The air was thick with the scent of gopher wood, pitch, and clean hay. They were sealed in. There was no turning back. For 7 days, they lived in this strange, quiet limbo. They moved about their tasks, feeding the animals and checking their stores, their movements deliberate and their words few. It was a week of solemn contemplation, a final pause between the world that was and the world that would be. Through the high window, they watched the sky. It remained unchanged, a sickly, bruised canvas, unnaturally still. The sun rose and set, its light weak and filtered. The dying world outside continued in its last moments of ignorant bliss. Some of the scorners, emboldened by the week of inaction, crept back. They banged on the massive hull, their taunts now tinged with a nervous bravado. "Come out, Noah! Has your nerve failed you? The sky is empty! Your God has forgotten you!" Inside, the family heard the faint, dull thuds against the wood. They looked at each other, their faith an unbreachable fortress against the last whispers of a doomed world. They did not answer. They simply waited. On the morning of the 7th day, the final day of the Creator's grace, everything changed. It began not with rain, but with a shudder deep within the earth. A low, powerful groan, like a great beast stirring in its sleep, vibrated up through the hull of the ark. The animals grew restless in their stalls, their soft calls turning into low moans of anxiety. Then, all at once, the fountains of the great deep burst forth. All over the world, the ground split open. In the deserts, in the mountains, in the middle of the plains, massive fissures tore through the crust of the earth. From these chasms, geysers of subterranean water, water that had been sealed away since the dawn of creation, erupted with cataclysmic force. They shot hundreds of feet into the air, hissing and roaring, turning the land into a churning, muddy sea in a matter of hours. The people of the world, who had been watching the sky for rain, were caught completely by surprise. The judgment was not coming from above, but from beneath their very feet. The cities built in valleys were the first to go, inundated by violent torrents of muddy water that swept away homes and temples in an instant. The people's screams were swallowed by the roar of the erupting deep. At the same time, the second part of the judgment began. The sky, which had been so still, turned a horrifying black. The windows of heaven, the celestial storehouses of water Enoch had seen in the first heaven, were opened. But this was not rain. It was a solid, vertical wall of water, a celestial ocean being upended upon the earth. The sound was deafening, a constant, world-engulfing roar that drowned out everything else. Inside the ark, the dim light from the high window vanished, plunging them into absolute blackness, broken only by the flickering of their oil lamps. The vessel, which had sat immobile for so long, began to rock and creak as the ground beneath it turned to slurry. Then, with a great lurch, the ark lifted. It rose on the surging waters, floating free from the land it had been bound to for so long. The family stumbled, grabbing onto posts and walls to keep their footing. They were afloat. They were adrift on the waters of judgment. The scorners who had been banging on the hull were now screaming, clawing at the slick-pitched wood as the water rose around their ankles, then their knees, then their chests. Their taunts turned to desperate, terrified pleas. "Noah, let us in. You were right. Forgive us, let us in." Their cries were faint, barely audible over the roar of the deluge, and in a few moments they were silenced completely, swept away by the raging currents. For 40 days and 40 nights, the deluge continued without pause. The waters from below and the waters from above met and mingled, a perfect, inescapable cataclysm. The ark was tossed about like a child's toy on the violent, chaotic sea. It was a world of unending noise, darkness, and violent motion. Noah and his family held on, their faith the only anchor in the storm. They tended to the terrified animals, speaking to them in soothing tones, their calm presence a miracle in the midst of the chaos. The waters rose relentlessly, swallowing the plains, then the hills, then the foothills of the mountains. The sprawling cities of men, the towering ziggurats of the watchers, the mighty forges of Azazalal were submerged, scoured from the face of the earth, their sins washed away in the torrent. Nothing man-made could withstand the fury of the deluge. Finally, the waters covered the highest peaks, even the summit of Mount Hermon where the watchers had made their fateful oath. The entire world was gone. All that remained was a single, shoreless, globe-spanning ocean, churning under a black, weeping sky. And on the face of these waters, a single vessel of gopher wood bobbed and drifted, a tiny, fragile speck of hope. Inside, 8 human souls, and the seed of all earthly life, waited in the darkness, preserved from the wrath that had consumed a world. The old creation was dead. The silence that would follow the storm would be the silence of a new, clean dawn. After 40 days of unrelenting tempest, the roaring ceased. The fountains of the deep were sealed, and the windows of heaven were closed. The violent, churning chaos of the deluge subsided into a vast, unsettling stillness. The ark, which had been tossed and battered, now drifted gently on the surface of a shoreless, silent sea that covered the entire globe. For 150 days, the waters prevailed upon the earth. Inside the ark, life continued in its strange, suspended rhythm. Day after day, Noah and his family moved through the dim, lamplit corridors, tending to the animals, rationing their food and praying. They were the last remnants of humanity, adrift in a wooden world, their only companion the endless, rhythmic sloshing of water against the hull. The silence from the world outside was more profound and terrifying than the noise of the storm had been. It was the silence of utter annihilation. They marked the passage of time with meticulous care, a discipline against the encroaching despair of the unending sea. They read from the scrolls of Enoch, his words a constant reminder that this destruction was part of a divine plan, a necessary surgery, not a meaningless catastrophe. His prophecies of a new heaven and a new earth, of a plant of righteousness that would flourish, were the seeds of their hope. Then, at the end of the 150 days, they felt a new sensation. A gentle, steady wind began to blow, a wind sent from the Creator to begin the long process of reclamation. The waters began to recede. Slowly, day by day, the sea level dropped. After many weeks, they felt a jolt, a scraping sound from deep within the hull. The ark had come to rest. It had settled upon the high peaks of Mount Ararat, the first land to re-emerge from the global ocean. Still, they waited. The world was not yet ready. For many more weeks, Noah sent forth birds from the high window to test the state of the world. First, he sent a raven, a hardy, scavenging bird. It flew back and forth, finding no place to rest but the ark itself, until the waters had abated further. Then, he sent forth a dove. The dove returned in the evening, unable to find rest. He waited 7 more days and sent the dove out again. This time, she returned at twilight, and in her beak was a freshly plucked olive leaf. A wave of joyous relief washed over the family. It was the first sign of new life, a message from the recovering world that the judgment was truly over. The olive leaf was a symbol of peace, a promise that the earth was beginning to heal. Noah waited another 7 days and sent the dove forth one final time. She did not return, for she had found a place to make her home in the reborn world. The time had come. The voice of the Creator spoke to Noah again, the first time since he had entered the ark. "Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons wives with thee. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful, and multiply upon the earth." With a trembling hand, Noah unsealed the great door from the inside. As he pushed it open, brilliant, clean sunlight flooded the interior of the ark for the first time in over a year. They squinted, their eyes accustomed to the long twilight, and breathed in the air of the new world. It was pure, fresh, and washed clean of all corruption. They stepped out onto the damp, fertile soil of the mountain. The world was pristine, reborn. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The landscape was empty of any sign of the former civilization, but it was green with the first shoots of new growth. First, Noah built an altar. It was his first act in the new world, an act of gratitude and worship. He took one of each of the clean beasts and clean fowls, the 7th pairs he had preserved for this very purpose, and offered them as a burnt offering upon the altar. The smoke from the sacrifice rose straight up into the clear air, a sweet and pleasing aroma to the Lord, a sign of mankind's renewed and righteous devotion. As the smoke ascended, the Creator made his covenant, not just with Noah, but with all of creation. A magnificent, 7-colored arc of light appeared in the sky, a phenomenon never before seen. It was a rainbow, a bridge of light between heaven and the new earth. The divine voice spoke, a promise that resonated in the hearts of Noah's family and in the very fabric of the world itself. "This is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for perpetual generations. I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh." It was a promise of stability, a declaration that the natural order once withdrawn was now restored and guaranteed. The world would never again suffer such a total elemental destruction. Noah and his family fell to their knees in awe and gratitude, their faces bathed in the light of the rainbow. The long nightmare was over. The terror of the flood was replaced by the promise of the covenant. The scrolls of Enoch had chronicled the judgment of the old world. And now Noah's family stood at the very beginning of the new one, under the sign of a celestial bow, tasked with a simple but profound command: to be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth with righteousness, truth, and joy. The plant of righteousness, prophesied by Enoch, had taken root. The new world began. Noah and his family descended from the slopes of Ararat, becoming the progenitors of a new humanity. The animals they had preserved scattered across the cleansed earth, multiplying and filling the empty lands. The cycles of the seasons returned, governed by the covenant of the rainbow. The plant of righteousness had been sown. But as the scrolls of Enoch had foretold, the soil of the human heart remained fertile ground for both good and evil. Generations passed. Cities were built anew. Nations rose and fell. The memory of the Great Flood faded from a stark reality into a distant legend, a myth whispered by a few. The scrolls of Enoch passed down through the line of Shem were preserved by a righteous remnant, but their apocalyptic warnings were often ignored by a world eager to forget its capacity for corruption. The cycles of sin and judgment that Enoch had prophesied in his Apocalypse of Weeks began to unfold, just as he had written. Humanity, though given a clean slate, began to walk the familiar paths of pride, violence, and apostasy. And what of Enoch? His journey did not end with his fiery ascension. He was, as promised, taken to the heavens to serve. He did not return to the throne room of the Ancient of Days, for his role was no longer that of a herald. He was brought to a great celestial library, a chamber connected to the sixth heaven, the realm of the archangels and pure knowledge. This was the Chamber of Records. Its walls were lined with shelves that stretched into infinity, holding not scrolls of parchment but living crystalline tablets. Each tablet contained the life of a human solivary thought, every word, every deed, from birth to death, recorded in perfect, irrefutable detail. It was here that the books were kept, the books that would be opened on the final day of judgment. Enoch was given his new eternal purpose. He was no longer the scribe of righteousness for a single generation, but for all of them. Under the tutelage of the archangel Raphael, who often visited him, and the stern guidance of Uriel, he learned to read and understand the intricate language of the soul tablets. He was a celestial chronicler, a keeper of accounts for the Lord of Spirits. He watched the long, slow unfolding of human history from his vantage point, not as a distant, uncaring observer, but with the heavy heart of a patriarch watching his descendants. He saw the building of the Tower of Babel, a foolish echo of the Watcher's pride, and saw the confusion of tongues that scattered mankind. He saw the calling of Abraham from the line of Shem, the fulfillment of the prophecy of the third week. He saw the giving of the law to Moses at Sinai, the enclosure for the righteous he had foretold. He saw the glory of Solomon's temple and its eventual destruction. He saw the dispersal of the chosen people, their suffering and their endurance. He witnessed every war, every act of kindness, every betrayal, every prayer that rose to the heavens. Each event was a confirmation of the vision he had been granted, a turn of the page in the grand narrative he had been chosen to record. His primary task was to assist the angels of record. When a soul departed the earthly realm, its tablet would be brought to the chamber. Enoch would review the life recorded, his gaze filled with a profound, sorrowful wisdom. He saw kings whose tablets were filled with oppression and bloodshed, and humble farmers whose lives shone with quiet acts of charity and faith. He saw the righteous, whose deeds were marked in luminous golden script, and the wicked, whose crimes were etched in characters of smoke and shadow. He was a silent witness, a servant of the perfect, divine memory. He felt neither joy nor anger, only the deep, abiding truth of the law. Every action has a consequence, and nothing is ever forgotten. In his moments of contemplation, he would sometimes look toward the lower realms. He could feel the presence of the fallen angels he had condemned. He could feel Azazel, raging in his dark prison beneath the desert, his pride undiminished even in defeat. He could feel Semjaza and his followers, bound in the valleys of the earth, their long vigil of 70 generations slowly, inexorably passing, their despair a cold, constant presence in the foundations of the world. Their fate served as the dark counterpoint to his own. They had chosen a moment of earthly pleasure and were rewarded with an eternity of darkness. He had chosen the path of righteousness and was granted an eternity of service in the light. Enoch waits. He writes. He watches. He knows the final chapters of his prophecy are yet to unfold. He waits for the end of the 9th week, when the world will be written down for destruction, and for the dawn of the 10th, when the great eternal judgment will commence. On that day, he knows he will be called upon again. The books in his celestial library will be brought forth before the great white throne. The Son of Man, the elect one whose face shone like lightning, will sit as the judge of all. The dead, small and great, will stand before him. The chained watchers will be brought from their prisons, and Enoch, the 7th from Adam, the man who walked with God, will stand as the scribe of righteousness, the eternal witness. His testimony, written in the scrolls on earth and in the tablets of heaven, will be read, and on that day the final sentence will be passed. The old heaven and old earth will pass away, and the endless weeks of goodness and righteousness will finally, gloriously begin.